The cold air in the sunken temple always carried the scent of ancient stone, damp earth, and something else, something faintly metallic and green, like forgotten prayers clinging to the moss. 17 years of her life, Elara Vance had breathed it, her slender frame almost disappearing into the worn temple robes that were several sizes too large. Every morning before the first sliver of dawn pierced the dense canopy of the whisperwood, she began her solitary duties. Her fingers, accustomed to the chill, moved with a practiced grace, wiping away the faint film of dust that settled perpetually on the altar before the colossal silent wolf statue. Her world was this temple, its crumbling arches and forgotten corners her only companions. Ilara remembered little of her parents, only the echoing void they left behind, a quiet ache deep in her chest. The temple had been her sanctuary, a silent guardian in a life otherwise devoid of warmth. She found a strange comfort in the relentless repetition of her tasks, the methodical sweep of her broom, the precise placement of fresh water in the offering bowls. Each movement was a quiet meditation, a way to anchor herself in a world that often felt too vast and indifferent. The silent wolf statue dominated the central chamber, a behemoth carved from obsidian-like black stone, its surface worn smooth by 1,000 years of untouched stillness. Its eyes, fashioned from polished onyx, seemed to drink in the scarce light, reflecting it back as an unreadable, impenetrable gaze. Ilara had spent countless hours gazing at it, imagining the life it once held, the stories it had silently witnessed. For her, it was more than just a statue. It was the temple's heartbeat, a constant, silent presence that offered a peculiar kind of solace. She often spoke to it in her mind, sharing her small, whispered worries, knowing it would offer no reply, but feeling heard nonetheless. Today, however, a new sensation stirred the temple's ancient quiet. As Alara knelt to scrub a stubborn patch of lichen from the base of the altar, her fingertips brushed against the cold stone. A subtle thrumming vibration, faint but unmistakable, traveled up her arm. She paused, her breath catching in her throat, her head tilting slightly. What was that, she wondered, her inner voice a whisper of confusion. She pressed her hand flat against the stone, feeling the faint tremor pulse beneath her palm. It was not the usual rumble of distant thunder, nor the familiar creak of old stone settling. This was different, more intimate, as if the very heart of the temple had begun to beat. A wave of gooseflesh prickled her skin. Ilara had never experienced anything like it in all her years within these hallowed walls. The silent wolf statue had stood motionless, truly silent, for a millennium. Legend spoke of its immense power, of ancient spirits bound within its form, but those were just stories, bedtime tales told by the few pilgrims who still visited. The statue remained a stoic, unyielding monument to a forgotten age, its stillness absolute. Yet the vibration persisted, a low, resonant hum emanating from the statue's colossal base. She stood slowly, her gaze fixed on the onyx eyes of the great wolf. A strange mix of fear and an almost childish wonder welled within her. Her heart began to beat a little faster, a frantic drum against her ribs. She took a hesitant step closer, then another, drawn by an invisible current. The air around the statue seemed to shimmer, though she knew it was only her imagination, her mind playing tricks. Still, the feeling of subtle energy, a nascent power stirring, was undeniable. It was as if the very air itself had grown heavy, pregnant with an unspoken secret about to unfold. Ilara reached out a trembling hand, not quite daring to touch the statue itself, but hovering inches from its dark, polished surface. The thrumming grew marginally stronger, a deep, almost musical resonance that resonated not just in her hand, but deep within her bones. A peculiar warmth spread through her, chasing away the usual chill of the temple. She felt a strange pull, an inexplicable connection to the ancient stone, as if it was calling to her, stirring something equally ancient within her own soul. From the shadowed doorway leading to the temple's residential quarters, Elder Lyra watched. Her face, a roadmap of etched lines and time-worn wisdom, held a solemn expression. Her eyes, though clouded by age, were sharp and perceptive, missing nothing. She leaned lightly on her polished wooden staff, its tip barely scraping the stone floor. Lyra had seen many things in her 68 years, had guarded the temple's secrets with an unwavering devotion. She knew the legends, knew the prophecies, and she knew Alara. Lyra's gaze lingered on the young servant girl, a profound, troubled understanding in her ancient eyes. She saw the tremor in Alara's hand, the quiet wonder in her blue eyes, the way her small body seemed to almost vibrate in sync with the unspoken pulse of the statue. Lyra had always sensed something different about Alara, a quiet light that burned within the girl, a unique resonance that spoke of ancient bloodlines and forgotten destinies. She had often wondered if Alara was the one, the girl spoken of in the whispered prophecies, the key to the very heart of the temple's deepest mystery. The sight before her now only deepened that long-held suspicion. Alara, oblivious to the elder's watchful eye, felt a sudden urge to make an offering. It was not the scheduled time for such a ritual, but the impulse was strong, an insistent whisper in her mind. She turned, walking toward the small alcove where the fresh herbs and spring water were kept. Her thoughts raced, trying to find a logical explanation for the tremor. Perhaps it was a burrowing creature, a small animal moving beneath the altar? But the sensation was too deep, too pervasive, too old to be something so mundane. It felt as if the very bedrock of the world was shifting, awakening. She carefully selected a sprig of sacred juniper, its scent sharp and clean, a small clay bowl filled with pure spring water, and a pinch of dried night bloom petals, their fragrance sweet and comforting. These were the simple offerings, the daily gestures of respect for the temple's quiet power. As she returned to the altar, the thrumming vibration seemed to intensify, a deeper, more insistent beat. It was no longer subtle, it was a palpable presence in the air, a low hum that resonated through the massive stone pillars. Alara knelt again before the statue, her fingers tracing the faded carvings on the altar. She poured the water into the first offering bowl, its surface rippling with the vibration. Then, with a whispered prayer for peace and understanding, she placed the juniper sprig into a second bowl. Finally, she scattered the delicate night bloom petals around the base of the silent wolf statue, their soft colors a stark contrast against the dark stone. As the last petal drifted down, settling gently onto the statue's ancient surface, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor rippled through the colossal form of the silent wolf. It was not a violent shake, not a dramatic shift, but a subtle internal movement, as if a great sleeping beast had merely stretched in its slumber. A thin cloud of ancient dust, fine as ash, detached itself from the statue's broad shoulders, drifting silently down to settle on the dark stone floor. Alara saw it, her blue eyes wide with disbelief and a sudden, profound awe. The dust motes shimmered in the faint light, like tiny dancing stars. No one else noticed, not the unseen creatures rustling in the shadows, not Elder Lyra in the distant doorway. Only Alara, her heart pounding with a mixture of terror and exhilaration, witnessed the silent wolf's first quiet stir in 1,000 years. The massive oak doors of Blackwood Keep's great hall thudded shut, the sound echoing through the cold stone chamber as Lord Caelan Thorne settled onto his imposing throne. His gaze swept over the array of advisors and captains assembled before him, their faces a mixture of deference and underlying tension. Caelan inhaled deeply, the crisp air carrying the scent of hearth smoke and the metallic tang of polished armor, a constant reminder of his dominion. He prided himself on control, on the meticulous order he imposed upon his lands. Yet recently, a disquieting undercurrent had begun to ripple through his carefully managed world. He leaned forward slightly, his silver wolf sigil glinting on his cloak in the torchlight. Reports from the outlying villages speak of unease, his voice, deep and resonant, cut through the quiet. Farmers claim their livestock are restless. The hunters report strange shadows in the whisperwood. They whisper of ancient stirrings. A captain shifted his well-mate, his armor clanking softly. Caelan's sharp gray eyes narrowed. He did not tolerate superstition, yet he could not ignore the practical implications of widespread fear. Unrest bred rebellion, and rebellion threatened the delicate balance he had fought so hard to maintain. One elder advisor, a man named Thomas, cleared his throat. "My lord, the common folk always attribute such things to the old tales. The prophecies, you know, The silent wolf. Kalen's jaw tightened imperceptibly. He knew the prophecies, of course. Every child in his domain grew up with stories of the sunken temple, of the colossal statue that had stood motionless for 1,000 years, guarding a secret whispered to be either a blessing or a curse. He had always regarded them as folklore, tools to keep the populace in line, but never as literal threats to his iron rule. Yet a prickle of unease had begun to form beneath his stern exterior. His scouts, hardened men who scoffed at ghost stories, had also reported unusual sounds emanating from deep within the Whisperwood. Sounds they could not quite place, sounds that made the hair on their arms stand on end. He considered the sheer scale of the silent wolf, its ancient, formidable presence. 1,000 years of stillness was a testament to its inert nature, yet the legends persisted for a reason. He wondered if perhaps there was more truth to the old wives' tales than he had allowed himself to believe. He steepled his fingers, his gaze distant for a moment. The temple has been quiet for centuries. Why now do these whispers gain such traction? His question was rhetorical, a challenge to the unseen forces that seemed to be subtly undermining his authority. The scent of leather from his own gauntlets filled his nostrils as he brought a hand to his chin, contemplating. He valued logic, strategy, and strength. The unpredictable nature of ancient magic, however, was a variable he found deeply unsettling. He would rather face an invading army than a prophecy come to life. The first he could defeat was steel and tactics. The second felt like wrestling with shadows. The thought of the sunken temple, shrouded in its perpetual dampness and mystery, stirred a flicker of curiosity within him, despite his pragmatic dismissal of its legends. He remembered stories of its hidden chambers, of the immense power supposedly sealed beneath the silent wolf. If there was any truth to the prophecies, if the statue truly held some dormant force, then it was his duty, his right, to understand and control it. Stability was his bedrock, and anything that threatened it, even an ancient legend, demanded his full attention. He concluded the meeting abruptly, dismissing his advisors with a wave of his hand, the click of their retreating boots echoing in the vast, cold hall. Kalen remained, a solitary figure on his throne, the weight of his domain pressing down on him, his mind already formulating a plan to investigate the temple and its ancient secrets more closely. Meanwhile, miles away within the hushed sanctity of the sunken temple, Ilara moved with her usual quiet grace, her worn temple robes rustling softly against the moss-covered stones. The air was cool and heavy, carrying the familiar sense of damp earth, ancient stone, and the faint, sweet perfume of long-burnt incense. Her heart still carried the strange tremor from the day before, a sensation that had settled deep within her bones, refusing to dissipate. The memory of the statue's subtle vibration, the dust falling from its shoulders, played over and over in her mind, a secret burden she felt compelled to share. She found Elder Lyra tending to a small herb garden in a secluded alcove, her gnarled fingers carefully plucking withered leaves. The elder's silver hair was pulled back in its usual severe bun, her frail frame bent over the patch of soil. Alara approached hesitantly, her soft footsteps barely disturbing the pervasive quiet. "Elder Lyra?" Her voice was a mere whisper, almost lost in the drip of water from the temple's high arches. The elder straightened slowly, her eyes, though clouded with age, sharp and perceptive, fixing on Alara. "Yes, child." Lyra's voice was calm, measured, carrying the weight of countless years in forgotten lore. Alara wrung her hands, her gaze flickering towards the colossal silent wolf statue in the central chamber, its black stone surface radiating an almost palpable, dormant power. The very thought of it sent a shiver down her spine, a mixture of awe and fear. "Yesterday," Alara began, her words tumbling out faster than intended, "when I placed the offering before the silent wolf, I felt something." Elder Lyra's eyes softened for a fraction of a second, a fleeting glimpse of something akin to worry in their depths, before her expression became stern once more. She turned fully to Alara, her gaze piercing. "Felt something, Alara? The temple has its own rhythms, child. The ancient stones settle, the earth shifts. You are young and your imagination is vivid." Her words were dismissive, yet Alara caught the slightest tremor in the elder's hand as she reached for a watering can. a tiny detail that did not escape her keen observation. The scent of damp earth grew stronger as Lyra watered the herbs, the fragile green shoots a stark contrast to the ancient stone around them. Alara felt a familiar pang of isolation. It was always like this. Her quiet observations, her unique sensitivities were often brushed aside, attributed to her youth or her solitary existence. She longed for someone to truly understand, to acknowledge the strange connection she felt to this ancient place, to the statue itself. She could still feel the faint hum against her fingertips, a ghostly echo of the tremor. It had not been imagination. It had been real. Her heart ached with a quiet desperation, a yearning for validation, for someone to believe the unspoken truths that resonated deep within her. But Elder, Alara pressed gently, her voice barely audible. It was different, a deep thrumming, like something awakening. Dust fell from its shoulders. I saw it. Lyra paused, her gaze now fixed not on Alara, but on the distant, dark form of the statue. A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the rhythmic drip of water and the distant rustle of unseen creatures in the shadowy corners of the temple. Alara watched the elder's face, searching for a sign, a flicker of recognition. She saw only a mask of calm, but the subtle tension around Lyra's mouth, the way her grip tightened on the watering can, spoke volumes. The silent wolf has stood for 1,000 years, Alara, Lyra finally said, her voice softer this time, but still firm. It is a symbol of eternal watchfulness, not of waking. Do not allow your feelings to mislead you. There are things best left undisturbed, even in thought. Lyra's words carried a double meaning, Alara sensed. It was not just a dismissal, but a warning, a subtle plea to let sleeping legends lie. The elder returned to her herbs, her movements deliberate, closing off further conversation. Alara sighed, a quiet, defeated sound that vanished into the vastness of the temple. She felt a profound loneliness settle over her, a chill that had nothing to do with the temple's damp air. Her truth, her strange experience, remained hers alone, a secret she now carried with a heavier heart. She returned to her chores, the rhythmic sweep of her broom a small comfort, but the tremor in her spirit persisted, a silent counterpoint to the temple's ancient hush. That night, sleep did not come easily for Alara. The lingering scent of damp earth and incense from the temple clung to her, and the image of the silent wolf, its vast dark form, dominated her thoughts. She lay on her thin cot in the temple's humble servants' quarters, listening to the gentle drip of water outside, the world outside her window cloaked in an inky blackness. Her mind replayed the tremor, the faint dust, Elder Lyra's evasive answers. A sense of foreboding, heavy and unspoken, settled over her. She closed her eyes, seeking refuge in unconsciousness, but found herself instead plunged into a vivid, unsettling dream. She was somewhere dark, oppressed by an immense weight. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of cold, damp earth, pressing down on her as if she were buried alive. Panic began to claw at her throat, a desperate need to breathe, to escape the suffocating darkness. Then, through the oppressive gloom, she saw them. Two brilliant pulsing blue lights. They pulsed with an urgent, desperate energy, and as her dream eyes adjusted, she realized they were the eyes of a wolf, a colossal wolf trapped beneath the dark, churning earth. The wolf was struggling, its powerful body straining against the invisible bonds that held it captive. A low growl, deep and sorrowful, emanated from its throat, vibrating through the earth and into Alara's very being. She felt its pain, its longing for freedom, as if it were her own. The air in the dream tasted metallic, like fear and desperation. She tried to reach out, to touch the wolf, to offer some comfort, but her dream limbs were heavy, unresponsive. The blue eyes, so familiar and yet so terrifyingly urgent, locked onto hers, conveying a silent plea, a profound sorrow that echoed the loneliness she often felt in her waking life. The struggle intensified. The earth around the wolf bucked and groaned, tiny cracks appearing in its dark surface, each fissure glowing faintly with the same urgent blue light that emanated from the wolf's eyes. A sound began to build, a low, guttural rumble that grew steadily into a mournful, echoing howl. It was a sound born of ancient pain, of long suffering, of a primal yearning that seemed to tear at the very fabric of her dream world. The howl was not one of aggression, but of deep, aching sorrow, of a desperate cry for release. It twisted her gut, a knot of empathy and terror forming in her chest. The wolf's eyes, those piercing blue beacons, stared into hers, and in their depths, Alara saw a reflection of her own unspoken sadness, her own yearning for understanding. She felt a connection, profound and inexplicable, an ancient link that transcended time and stone. The howl grew louder, more piercing, shaking her to her core. It was a sound that belonged to the wild, to forgotten places, to a pain so vast it encompassed centuries. The blue light intensified, becoming almost blinding, burning into her dream sight, a symbol of both urgency and deep-seated despair. The dream became a maelstrom of sound and emotion. The earth crumbled, the howl reached a crescendo, a sound that was both a lament and a desperate call for help. Ilara felt herself being pulled, drawn into the wolf's sorrow, its trapped existence mirroring her own sense of being confined by her circumstances. The air grew cold, a chilling dampness seeping into her dream skin, and the taste of bitter fear coated her tongue. She yearned to reach out, to free the magnificent, suffering creature. But the weight of the dream earth, the insurmountable obstacle, kept them apart. Then with a final heart-wrenching wail, the dream shattered. Alara's eyes snapped open in the oppressive darkness of her small room, her body drenched in a cold sweat. Her breath hitched in her throat, catching painfully in her lungs. The phantom echo of that distant, sorrowful howl still rang in her ears, vibrating through the quiet temple, making her heart pound against her ribs with a frantic, insistent rhythm. The blue light of the wolf's eyes seemed seared behind her eyelids, a terrifying, urgent memory that refused to fade. She sat upright, clutching her thin blanket, the chill of the dream clinging to her skin, the undeniable sense of a presence, a powerful ancient sorrow, now wide awake within her. The lingering echo of a sorrowful howl still scraped at Alara's throat when the first rays of dawn seeped into the sunken temple. Her heart felt like a trapped bird, beating a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a rhythm that had not quieted since the nightmare's grip released her. The dream's images, a howling wolf with urgent blue eyes beneath dark earth, clung to her waking mind like damp moss. She moved through the temple's shadowed aisles, her footsteps hushed against the ancient stone, performing the rote duties that had been her only constant since childhood. The cool air, thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient incense, did little to settle the tremor in her hands as she began to clean the altar before the silent wolf statue. Her fingers, usually so practiced in tracing the familiar lines of the altar's surface, felt clumsy and uncertain today. She dipped a soft cloth into a basin of cool, clear water, the metallic tang of the basin's rim pressing against her thumb. The silence of the temple, usually a comforting blanket, now felt stretched and brittle, ready to snap. She glanced up at the colossal figure, its obsidian-like form rising 30 feet above her, the onyx eyes reflecting the faint gray light filtering through the high arches. The statue had been a steadfast, unchanging presence for as long as anyone could remember, a silent guardian of forgotten knowledge. Yet, since the tremor she felt days ago, an unsettling question had begun to stir within her. She knelt, polishing the base of the statue, her eyes scanning the familiar thousand-year-old stone for any sign, any hint of the subtle vibration she had felt. Her fingers brushed against a small irregularity, a rough patch where the smooth surface should have continued. She paused, her breath catching in her chest. She leaned closer, her blue eyes narrowing in the dim light, and a cold wave of disbelief washed over her. There, running from the very base of the statue, a hairline fracture spiderwebbed across the ancient stone. It was impossibly thin, a dark vein against the polished black, but it was undeniably new. A gasp escaped her lips, a tiny puff of white mist in the cool air. She reached out, her fingertips trembling as they brushed the crack. It felt sharp, a fresh wound in the stone that had stood untouched for 1,000 years. The deep, dark line seemed to pulse faintly, almost imperceptibly, as if holding a secret current. The sheer impossibility of it caused a knot of dread to tighten in her stomach. How could the silent wolf, a monument of such impenetrable density and age, suddenly bear a new scar? The temple elders always spoke of its enduring stillness, its timeless, unyielding strength. This crack defied every legend, every truth she had ever known about it. Her mind raced, connecting this impossible fissure to the subtle tremor she had felt days before, and then to the urgent blue eyes of the wolf in her dream. A shiver, colder than the temple air, traced its way up her spine. Was she seeing things? Was her mind playing tricks on her, haunted by the night's disturbing visions? She pressed her palm flat against the cool stone beside the crack, closing her eyes for a moment, trying to feel for an answer, a vibration, anything that would explain this impossible change. There was only the pained, unyielding silence of the stone beneath her touch, yet the image of that jagged line was seared into her memory. She knew it was real. Her fingers felt the slight indentation, the rough edge that was not there yesterday. The morning light crept higher, painting fleeting patterns across the crumbling pillars. Alara continued her duties, but her gaze kept returning to the crack. It seemed to expand and contract in her peripheral vision, a living thing within the ancient stone. She felt a strange pull, a sense of urgency she couldn't quite name. Later that day, during her brief moments of respite, Alara found herself drawn to a quiet corner of the temple, a secluded nook where the light was soft and the shadows deep. She pulled out a small, tattered sketchbook she kept hidden, its pages filled with crude drawings of temple arches and the familiar, sorrowful faces of forgotten saints. This time, however, her hand moved with a different purpose. She found a piece of charcoal, the rough stick leaving a dusty trail on the coarse parchment. Her blue eyes, usually downcast, were now fixed, distant, as if seeing something beyond the temple walls. She began to sketch the silent wolf statue, not just its physical form, but the feeling it evoked within her. The charcoal scratched softly against the paper, a rhythmic whisper in the quiet space. She drew its massive head, the watchful curve of its back, the powerful, silent strength etched into its obsidian form. But as she drew, something more began to emerge. Her fingers moved almost autonomously, guided by an unknown impulse. She found herself focusing on the statue's eyes, the deep onyx that reflected the faintest light. In her drawing, she gave them a subtle depth, a glimmer of something more than just polished stone. She drew lines that seemed to vibrate, shadows that hinted at movement where there was none. She tried to capture the essence of the tremor, the subtle shift she had felt, the way it had seemed to breathe. It was as if her hand knew a truth her mind could not yet articulate. The latent energy of the statue, a power she could only sense in fleeting moments, began to bleed onto the page. She sketched the base, and without conscious thought, her charcoal traced the faint, impossible crack she had discovered earlier. It was not just a line, it was a scar, a wound that seemed to throb with a quiet, powerful force in her drawing. She looked at the image, a strange mix of recognition and wonder in her gaze. The statue on the page was more than just a stone effigy. It felt alive, brimming with a dormant power that was slowly beginning to stir. She felt a profound sense of connection to the image, as if she were communicating with the statue through her art, understanding it in a way no one else could. Hours slipped away as Alara lost herself in the act of creation. The scratch of charcoal, the smell of damp paper, the cool air against her cheek, these were the only realities. She felt a deep, almost primal pull to understand the statue, to interpret its subtle changes. Each stroke of charcoal was a question, each shading a whispered possibility. She was trying to give voice to the silent thrumming beneath the stone, to the ancient energy that now seemed to course through her own veins. The drawings became a secret language, a personal record of the temple's awakening. She tucked the sketchbook carefully back into its hiding place, feeling a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Her quiet world was changing, and the statue, her only true companion, was at the heart of it. The next afternoon, the temple's ancient hush was abruptly shattered by a clamor from the entrance. The usual drip of water and soft rustle of unseen creatures gave way to the sharp, unfamiliar sound of horse hooves on stone and the distinct jingle of armor. Alara, sweeping dust from a forgotten alcove, froze. Her heart leapt into her throat. Outsiders rarely disturbed the sunken temple, and those who did usually approached with reverence and quietude. This arrival was different. It was an intrusion. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows. her worn robes blending with the gray stone, her breath held tight in her chest. A wave of innate fear washed over her, the fear of the unknown, the fear of being seen. From her hiding place, Alara watched as a figure in gleaming armor dismounted, his tall frame cutting a stark silhouette against the archway. He was a messenger, she realized, by the precise cut of his tunic and the formal way he carried himself. He moved with a brisk, authoritative stride that seemed to crackle through the ancient, hallowed air. Two guards, equally stern and clad in practical leather and steel, remained by the horses, their presence a solid, unyielding statement of power. The very air around them felt sharper, colder, laced with the scent of leather, horse, and something almost metallic, the scent of purpose and command. Elder Lyra emerged from her chambers, her wooden staff tapping a slow, steady rhythm on the stone floor. Her face, usually serene, held a guarded expression. Her eyes, though clouded with age, were sharp and perceptive. She met the messenger at the threshold of the main chamber, her posture frail but dignified. The messenger spoke, his voice deep and resonant, echoing slightly in the vastness of the temple. He requested an audience, his tone formal and unyielding. "Lord Kalen Thorne sends his regards, Elder Lyra," he began, his voice carrying clearly to Alara's hiding spot. "He has received troubling reports of unusual occurrences near the Whisperwood, and he seeks your wisdom." Ilara's mind latched onto the words, unusual occurrences in Whisperwood. The Whisperwood was the sprawling, ancient forest that encircled the sunken temple, a place of mystery and age-old tales. But what kind of occurrences could be so unusual as to draw the attention of Lord Kalen, the formidable ruler of these lands? She remembered the unsettling howl in her dream, the one that had felt so real, so impossibly close. Could there be a connection? A prickle of unease spread across her skin. Elder Lyra listened, her face revealing nothing, her gaze fixed on the messenger. Alara could almost feel the weight of unspoken history hanging between them. The messenger continued, explaining that strange tremors had been felt in the outlying villages, tremors that shook the very foundations of homes, and unsettling sounds had been heard, distant and guttural, echoing through the trees at night. These disturbances, he explained, had grown more frequent, more intense, and Lord Kalen, ever the pragmatist, sought answers from the temple, the oldest fount of knowledge in the region. He finished his request, then stood in a moment of expectant silence, his eyes sweeping the chamber, lingering for a moment on the silent wolf statue. Alara held her breath, shrinking further into the shadows, afraid to draw attention to herself. Elder Lyra finally responded, her voice calm and measured, carrying the weight of years and ancient wisdom. She spoke of the delicate balance of nature, of old earth shifting, of cycles that ran deeper than human understanding. She agreed to an audience, inviting the messenger to wait while she prepared. The messenger nodded curtly, turning to rejoin his guards outside. As he turned, his cloak swirled, and Alara caught a sudden, startling glimpse of his sigil, a silver wolf's head, intricately embroidered against the dark fabric. It was a familiar image, sharp and precise. A cold dread seized her, gripping her heart in an icy vice. It was identical, a perfect match to the silver wolf's head she had seen in her dream, the one she had thought was a mere figment of her troubled sleep. The very image that had triggered the phantom howl, the one that had left her heart pounding. Her blood ran cold. The dream, the crack in the statue, the messenger, Lord Kalen, they were all intertwined, connected by this unsettling symbol. A deep, profound shiver, a mixture of fear and dawning recognition, traced its way down her spine. A heavy, rhythmic tread echoed through the ancient stones of the sunken temple, a sound utterly foreign to its quiet sanctity. Alara Vance froze, a dusting cloth slipping from her nerveless fingers to land silently on the damp flagstones. The scent of ozone and metal, sharp and intrusive, now mingled with the temple's familiar earthy aroma. Lord Kalen Thorne had arrived. She pressed herself further into the deep shadow of a crumbling archway, her heart beginning a frantic drum against her ribs. Guards clad in the dark, practical armor of Blackwood Keep filed in behind him, their polished breastplates reflecting the faint light filtering through the grotto's opening. Their presence seemed to suck the very air from the hallowed space, replacing its ancient peace with a palpable tension. Alara felt a shiver trace its way down her spine as the air grew heavy with an unfamiliar, almost menacing energy. She clutched the rough fabric of her temple robes, her knuckles white. Lord Kalen stood just inside the main entrance, his towering frame casting a long, imposing shadow across the moss-covered floor. His sharp gray eyes, accustomed to commanding, swept over the chamber, taking in the faded carvings in the vast, silent form of the wolf statue. He wore no armor today, only a dark, unadorned tunic and trousers that emphasized his formidable build. A silver wolf's head sigil pinned to his cloak. The air around him crackled with an unyielding authority that seemed to challenge the very stillness of the temple. Elder Lyra emerged from the shadows near the altar, her slender frame appearing almost fragile against Kalen's formidable presence. Her face, etched with the wisdom of her many years, remained composed, though Alara could sense the subtle shift in the elder's posture. Lyra's hands were clasped before her gnarled fingers intertwined, as if in silent prayer or deep contemplation. The elder's usual calm demeanor now held a steely resolve, a silent defiance against the intrusion. Lord Kalen, Lyra's voice was measured, a calm stream against a rising tide. Its usual quiet resonance now carried an almost defiant edge. You honor our humble sanctuary with your presence. Alara could hear the unspoken question hanging in the air, a challenge masked by politeness. She watched Kalen's gaze narrow, his dark beard framing a mouth set in a firm line. Elder Lyra, Kalen's voice was deep, resonant, and carried the weight of unquestioned power. It echoed through the chamber, disturbing the quiet reverence that usually prevailed. My scouts report unsettling tremors emanating from this region, growing stronger with each passing day. My people are disturbed. They speak of ancient legends stirring. Alara watched his eyes flick toward the silent wolf statue, a glint of something unreadable in their depths. Lyra's gaze followed his, resting for a moment on the colossal obsidian form. The earth shifts, Lord Kalen. It has always done so. The temple has stood for 1,000 years, weathering countless seasons and subtle movements of the land. Her words were a shield, designed to deflect, to offer a mundane explanation for phenomena she knew were anything but ordinary. Alara knew deep in her gut that Lyra understood far more than she let on. These are not natural tremors, Elder, Kalen countered, his tone hardening, losing its thin veneer of courtesy. My men report a low, guttural rumble accompanying them, a sound described as a primal growl that chills them to the bone. They speak of strange lights in the grotto, of an unnatural energy in the air. He took a step further into the chamber, his eyes sweeping across the ancient carvings on the walls. Alara felt her breath catch in her throat. Whispers and fears grow easily in the darkness, Lord Kalen, Lyra replied, her voice still unwavering, but Alara detected a flicker of concern in her aged eyes. Lyra's hands tightened almost imperceptibly, a silent signal of her growing unease. She was trying to protect something, Alara realized, something more than just the temple's peace. My people do not invent fear, Elder. Kalen's voice was now sharp, edged with irritation. They respond to tangible threats. These phenomena are tied to this temple, to that statue. The legends speak of a sealed secret, do they not? An ancient prophecy that ties the fate of this land to the awakening of the silent wolf. The words sealed secret and ancient prophecy struck Alara like a physical blow. She remembered her dreams, the trapped wolf, the blue eyes. A cold dread began to seep into her bones. Alara's mind raced, connecting the fragments she had heard. The strange tremor she felt, the crack in the statue, her vivid dreams, and now Kalen's words. There was more to this than just a slumbering relic. The statue held a secret, a power that even Lord Kalen, with all his might and authority, recognized and perhaps feared. She felt a strange mixture of fear and an almost defiant curiosity. Legends are often distorted by time and misinterpretation, Lord Kalen, Lyra said, her voice now a low murmur, laden with ancient weight. The temple's purpose is to preserve, not to awaken. The silent wolf is a guardian, a symbol of our ancestors' strength and wisdom. It has stood in silent vigil for 1,000 years. She met Kalen's piercing gaze without flinching, her eyes unwavering. And now it stirs, Kalen retorted, his voice a low growl, echoing the very sounds his scouts reported. Its stillness is broken. What has changed, Elder? What have you done, or allowed to be done, within these walls that would disturb a millennium of peace? His accusation hung heavy in the air, thick with unspoken threat. Alara felt a surge of indignation on Lyra's behalf, a quiet anger stirring within her. Alara watched Lyra closely, observing the subtle tightening of the elder's jaw, the slight clenching of her hands. Lyra was cornered, forced to choose her words with extreme caution. The elder's wisdom was deep, but Kalen's power was absolute in this land. He represented the world beyond the temple's ancient walls, a world of harsh realities and swift consequences. The temple's rhythms are slow, Lord Kalen, Lyra finally replied, her voice regaining some of its calm. We adhere to the ancient ways. No deliberate act has been made to disturb the statue's repose. Her gaze flickered, for the barest fraction of a second, towards Alara's hiding place, a glance so swift and subtle that only someone watching intensely would have noticed. Alara felt a prickle of alarm. Had Lyra seen her? Did she know Alara was listening? Kalen missed the glance, his attention fixated on the statue. He began to walk slowly towards it, his boots making soft, almost reverent thuds on the cold stone floor. Each step seemed to draw the air tighter, to amplify the silence. Alara pressed herself even further back, her heart thumping against her ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. She felt a profound sense of foreboding. He stopped directly before the colossal obsidian wolf, its head reaching high into the vaulted ceiling. Kalen tipped his head back, his gaze traveling up its massive form, scrutinizing every line, every ancient curve. The statue, immense and dark, remained utterly inert, a monolith of ancient power. Its surface, worn smooth by countless centuries, seemed to absorb the light around it, giving it an even more profound and unyielding presence. Alara held her breath, an unspoken plea forming in her mind, directed at the statue itself. Stay still, stay silent, do not give yourself away. She could feel the subtle thrumming from the statue again, a low vibration deep beneath the surface of the stone, a sensation only she seemed to perceive. It was like a dormant beast stirring in its sleep, aware of the intruder's presence but choosing not to react. Kalen reached out a hand, not quite touching the dark stone, but hovering inches from its ancient surface. His fingers were strong, accustomed to gripping a sword, to ruling. He seemed to be feeling for something, a vibration, a whisper of the power Lyra spoke of. Alara watched, mesmerized by the intensity of his focus. She could almost taste the anticipation in the air, a metallic tang of unspoken power. His hand slowly dropped, his shoulders slumping ever so slightly in what seemed to be a subtle gesture of frustration. The statue offered him no answers, no tremor, no glint of its onyx eyes. It remained a silent, imposing sentinel, revealing nothing of the secrets it held within. Alara felt a wave of strange relief wash over her, a brief respite from the agonizing tension. Kalen turned away from the statue, his gaze once again sweeping the chamber, a flicker of dissatisfaction in his eyes. He stopped near Lyra, his voice dropping to a lower, more menacing tone. Whatever is stirring, Elder, it falls under my domain. This power, if it is indeed real, affects my people, my land. I will know its nature, and I will control it, for the stability of the realm. His words were a clear warning, a declaration of intent that chilled Alara to the bone. Lyra's face remained impassive, but her lips pressed into a thin line. Some things are not meant to be controlled, Lord Kalen. Some ancient powers have their own will, their own purpose. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, yet it carried an immense weight, a hint of ancient knowledge and a solemn warning. Alara knew Lyra was speaking from deep understanding, from traditions passed down through generations. All things can be understood, Elder, Kalen countered, his gaze unwavering. An understanding leads to control. He then turned, moving to leave the chamber, his guards falling in behind him. As he walked past the statue, his back now towards its colossal form, Alara's eyes were fixed on the obsidian wolf. A faint, almost imperceptible gleam caught her attention. Just as Kalen reached the threshold, and as his gaze was directed away, the statue's onyx eyes seemed to shift. It was a fleeting moment, a trick of the dim light perhaps, or a sudden change in the angle of perception. But Alara swore she saw a faint, bluish glint, a momentary flash of life deep within the polished black stone. The eyes, usually dull and lifeless, seemed to focus, for the briefest of instants, directly towards her hiding place. Her breath hitched in her throat, a silent gasp trapped behind her lips. A surge of raw, electric energy shot through her, a recognition that transcended thought or logic. The statue had seen her. It had acknowledged her. A thrill, both terrifying and exhilarating, coursed through her veins, leaving her trembling. She felt an undeniable pull, a profound connection to the ancient stone, a bond that spoke of something far older than her 17 years. She watched Kalen's broad back as he exited the main chamber, his guards following with efficient precision. The heavy sound of their footsteps receded, then vanished entirely, leaving behind the temple's usual hallowed silence. Alara remained frozen, pressed against the cold stone, her heart still hammering. Then just before the last guard disappeared, Lord Kalen paused. He did not turn his body, but his head tilted almost imperceptibly. His piercing gaze swept back into the chamber, a quick, calculating movement that seemed to skim over every shadow, every ancient stone. His eyes paused, for the barest fraction of a second, directly on Alara's hiding spot. She felt the weight of that gaze, a sudden cold sense of exposure, as if her very presence had been pierced by his sharp intellect. Her entire body stiffened, fear locking her muscles. Then, he was gone, leaving her trembling in the sudden, echoing silence. The temple air still held the faint, lingering scent of Lord Kalen's presence, a sharp metallic tang that felt alien in the ancient stone chamber. Alara watched his retreating form disappear down the winding passage, followed by the heavy clanking of his guard's armor. Elder Lyra had already vanished into her private quarters, her face a mask of weary resignation, leaving Alara utterly alone in the vast, silent space. The echo of Lord Kalen's piercing gaze still prickled her skin, a phantom touch that made her shiver despite the temple's cool air. A profound quiet descended upon the sunken temple, thicker and more complete than before. The usual drip of water from unseen crevices seemed to hold its breath. The air itself felt charged, a subtle tension thrumming just beneath the surface of reality. Alara stood for a long moment, her worn temple robes blending with the shadows, her breath catching in her throat. Every fiber of her being pulled her towards the colossal silent wolf statue. It was an urge she could no longer deny, a quiet, insistent whisper in the deepest parts of her soul. Her feet moved of their own accord, soundless on the moss-dusted flagstones. The sheer size of the statue always humbled her, its obsidian-like form rising to meet the vaulted ceiling. She had cleaned its base countless times, tracing the cold, smooth lines of its paws with her fingertips. Yet today was different. Today, a new undeniable energy emanated from its still form, a silent call specifically for her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped within her chest. She reached the base of the statue, her gaze fixed on its massive, sculpted paw. The onyx eyes, normally blank and unseeing, seemed to hold a deeper, darker void now, as if peering into another dimension. A tremor of apprehension, mixed with an almost desperate curiosity, ran through her. What was happening to her, to this sacred place, to this ancient guardian? She remembered the tiny crack she had discovered, a hairline fracture barely visible unless one knew exactly where to look. It felt like a wound on something living. Hesitantly, Alara extended her hand. Her fingers trembled, just above the stone, a battle waging within her, fear warred with a compelling need, a sense of destiny she could not comprehend. This was forbidden, she knew. The statue was a relic, a symbol, not something to be touched in such a familiar way. Yet the longing within her was stronger than any rule, stronger than any fear. She felt an invisible current drawing her in, a quiet hum growing louder only for her. With a deep, shuddering breath, she finally placed her palm flat against the statue's cold, unyielding paw. The contact was immediate and profound, far more than just cold stone meeting warm flesh. A jolt, sharp and sudden, shot through her arm, up her shoulder, and into the very core of her being. It was not pain, but a raw, unbridled energy, ancient beyond imagining, rushing through her veins like a torrent. Her breath hitched, caught somewhere between a gasp and a groan. The temple chamber spun around her, the familiar stone walls blurring into indistinct shapes. Her mind reeled, assaulted by a whirlwind of sensations. It was like being plunged into a freezing river and then immediately pulled into a roaring fire, all at once. Her fingertips tingled with an intense pressure, as if the stone itself was reaching back, grasping her. A faint, almost imperceptible hum resonated within her bones, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to shake her very soul. Then the images began. They were not clear, distinct pictures, but flashes, fragments of memory not her own. She saw vast, open plains under an endless sky, populated by creatures she had only read about in ancient texts, beings of grace and formidable power. Wolves larger than any she had ever imagined, with coats like moonlight and eyes like ancient stars, moved with a fluid, silent majesty. Their howls, though unheard, echoed in her spirit, a symphony of wild, untamed sorrow. A flash of a young girl, her face obscured, but her spirit resonating with Alara's own, stood before a smaller version of the statue, her hand outstretched in a gesture of profound connection. Then images of fire and shadow, of fear and flight, of a world consumed by an encroaching darkness. She felt a crushing weight of loss, a millennium of grief and despair pressing down on her, not as memories but as pure, distilled emotion. It was a sorrow so vast, so encompassing, it threatened to drown her. A profound longing rose within her, an aching desire for something she had never known. A home, a pack, a sense of belonging that stretched back through the ages. Tears pricked at her eyes, hot and unwelcome, blurring the edges of her vision. This wasn't just ancient history, it was a living, breathing echo of something deeply painful, something that still cried out from the stone. The energy surging through her intensified, growing almost unbearable, threatening to splinter her consciousness. Her fingers locked around the statue's paw, an involuntary action, as if letting go would mean shattering into a million pieces. The cold stone now pulsed with a faint warmth, a steady, internal throb that synchronized with her own racing heartbeat. The air in the temple grew heavier, thick with an almost tangible sense of anticipation. It was a silence filled with impending sound, a stillness brimming with barely contained motion. The statue itself began to respond. A faint, ethereal glow emanated from deep within its obsidian form, seeping through the ancient stone like moonlight through mist. It was a soft, pulsing azure light, reminiscent of the blue Alara had seen in her dreams, the color of the wolf's eyes. The light highlighted the tiny cracks that crisscrossed the statue's surface, making them appear like veins of molten sapphire just beneath the skin of the rock. These cracks, once mere imperfections, now seemed to deepen and lengthen, almost imperceptibly, with each beat of the pulsing light. A low, guttural rumble began to rise from the very foundations of the temple. It was not the sound of thunder, nor the groan of settling earth. This was something deeper, something primal and ancient, resonating from the statue itself. The sound started as a faint tremor in the soles of her feet, then quickly escalated into a deep, vibrating thrum that vibrated through the stone floor, up her legs, and into her chest. It was a sound that shook the very air, a mournful, powerful growl held captive for 1,000 years, now finally beginning to break free. The rumble intensified, growing louder, deeper, echoing through the vast space of the sunken temple. Dust, disturbed by the profound vibrations, sifted down from the high arches and crumbling pillars, creating shimmering curtains in the ethereal blue light. The ancient stones of the temple groaned under the strain, a symphony of awakening. Alara could feel the pressure building, both within her and within the statue, a crescendo of raw, untamed power. Her head swam, the world tilted violently. The flashes of images, the sorrow, the longing, the sheer magnitude of the energy, all combined to overwhelm her senses. Her body, frail and unprepared, could not withstand the onslaught. Her knees buckled beneath her, the strength draining from her limbs as quickly as the energy rushed in. She felt herself falling, her vision tunneling, but her hand remained stubbornly pressed against the glowing stone. The rumble reached a deafening roar, a sound that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality itself. The blue light flared, blindingly bright for a fleeting moment, casting long dancing shadows that stretched and writhed like ancient spirits. Ilara's breath left her in a ragged gasp, her consciousness fraying at the edges. The last thing she registered was the immense, pulsating heat emanating from the statue's paw, a heat that promised both destruction and rebirth. She collapsed entirely, her body slumping to the mossy flagstones. Her hand, however, remained stubbornly connected to the now intensely glowing stone paw. The vibrations were a relentless assault, threatening to tear her apart from the inside. The guttural rumble, a sound that carried the weight of a millennium of silence, grew ever louder, ever more potent, poised to shatter the ancient hush of the sunken temple forever. The cold, ancient stone had been a distant memory, replaced by a consuming inferno that seared Alara's every nerve. She felt herself tumbling through a vast, echoing darkness, the deafening roar of 1,000 years of silence shattering around her. Images flashed past her closed eyes, towering forests under a pale moon, the glint of distant, sorrowful eyes, a boundless field of frost-kissed wildflowers swaying in a phantom breeze. It was a kaleidoscope of visions and sensations that were not her own, yet settled deep within her bones. A profound, aching loneliness resonated through her, a grief so ancient and immense it threatened to swallow her whole. She felt the crushing weight of stillness, the burden of an impossible secret, in the enduring, silent vigil of a creature bound to stone. Elder Lyra knelt beside Alara, her breath catching in her throat as she saw the girl lying motionless at the base of the silent wolf statue. The colossal obsidian form still thrummed with a faint internal glow, casting long, dancing shadows across the temple chamber. The air, usually cool and damp, now held a noticeable, almost unnatural warmth, thick with the scent of damp earth, and something else, something wild and untamed, like crushed pine needles and distant rain. Lyra's sharp eyes immediately took in Alara's ashen face, the fine sheen of sweat on her brow, and the faint blue luminescence that seemed to pulse beneath her skin. This was not merely unconsciousness, it was a deep spiritual exhaustion, a profound connection that had shaken the girl's very essence. Lyra's heart ached with a familiar fear, a fear she had carried for 17 years, ever since Alara was left on the temple steps as a babe. Her gnarled fingers, steady despite the tremor in her soul, quickly moved to Alara's pulse, finding it faint but rhythmic. Lyra knew this energy, this raw, untamed power. She had only read about it in the oldest, dustiest scrolls, prophecies whispered in hushed tones by generations of temple guardians. Now it manifested before her, vibrant and terrifying. She reached into her worn leather pouch, pulling out a small bundle of dried herbs, their earthy scent instantly mingling with the strange aroma in the air. Mumbling words older than the temple itself, a prayer to the silent guardians of the Whisperwood, she crushed the herbs between her palms, a green paste forming under the pressure. Her hands, though frail, moved with the swift certainty of long practice, applying the poultice to Alara's temples and wrists. Each murmured syllable was a plea, a ward, a desperate whisper against the encroaching chaos. Lyra wiped Alara's brow with a damp cloth, feeling the unusual heat radiating from the girl's skin. The light from the statue pulsed, almost in rhythm with Alara's faint heartbeat, a silent testament to the bond that had been forged in that moment of contact. Lyra looked at the statue, its onyx eyes still reflecting the chamber's faint light, and a profound, resigned understanding settled upon her features. The prophecies were unfolding, not as abstract warnings, but as a living, breathing force. She remembered the ancient texts, speaking of the chosen one, the one whose touch would stir the ancient heart. Her eyes, filled with a mix of sorrow and a fierce, protective love, rested on the girl. Miles away, within the cold, austere walls of Blackwood Keep, Lord Caelan Thorne stood before a sprawling map of his domain. The flickering torchlight cast dancing shadows across his stern face, highlighting the grim set of his jaw. His trusted scout, a burly man named Gareth, stood a respectful distance away, his voice hushed but urgent as he delivered his report. "My lord, the tremors. They are growing more violent, more frequent. Not just isolated shudders now, but deep rumbles that shake the very foundations of the outlying settlements. Old Man Hemlock's mill, near the Whisperwood, suffered a collapsed wall this morning. Kalen's gaze remained fixed on the map, his long fingers tracing the outline of the sunken temple. He felt a familiar surge of cold irritation. This was not mere geological instability. This was something else entirely. And the sounds? Kalen's voice was a low growl cutting through the heavy silence of the chamber. Gareth shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting towards the Lord's unyielding profile. The howls, my lord. They are unlike anything I have ever heard. Ethereal, they call them, like 1,000 wolves crying out from another world, mournful and full of an ancient pain. Our patrols reported feeling a strange pull towards the Whisperwood, an unsettling sense of urgency in the air. The wild creatures have grown restless too, my lord. Birds take flight at odd hours, deer herd in unusual patterns. Kalen's mind, always calculating, processed every word. He had dismissed the initial tremors as minor disturbances, but the sheer escalation, the spectral howls, painted a different picture. This was directly tied to the temple. He turned from the map, his gaze sweeping over Gareth with an intensity that made the scout involuntarily take a step back. Dispatch another patrol to the sunken temple, Kalen commanded, his voice ringing with authority. Double the guard. Tell them to report any further activity, any changes in the temple structure, any unusual phenomena, and tell them to be prepared for anything. This is no longer merely a matter of unsettling rumors. This is a disturbance to the very fabric of my domain, and it will be understood. Kalen's mind raced. The legends of the Silent Wolf, of a sealed power beneath it, were not just old wives' tales. He felt a growing sense of urgency, a strategic threat that demanded an immediate and decisive action. Control was paramount. Any instability threatened the delicate balance he had worked so hard to maintain. Back in the sunken temple, the unique warmth lingered, a soft embrace around Alara's still form. She felt a gentle stirring within her, like a seed beginning to sprout after a long, cold winter. The vast ocean of sorrow began to recede, replaced by the comforting pressure of Lyra's hand on her forehead. The wild, earthy scent was now familiar, almost pleasant, and the rhythmic murmuring of ancient words wove through her returning consciousness, a soothing lullaby. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy and unwilling to open. A deep weariness clung to her, a profound exhaustion that settled into her bones, but beneath it a strange vitality pulsed. She felt different, changed, as if a part of her had been stretched, expanded, to encompass something vast and unknowable. She forced her eyes open, the chamber lights a blur of soft, flickering amber. Lyra's face, etched with a mixture of relief and profound worry, slowly came into focus above her. The elder's eyes, usually sharp and knowing, now held a deep, unshed sorrow. Alara tried to speak, but her throat felt dry and raspy, the words catching. Lyra pressed a small clay cup to her lips, the liquid within cool and slightly bitter, tasting of roots and leaves. Alara swallowed, feeling a spark of strength return. What happened?" she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Lyra simply shook her head, her gaze shifting to the silent wolf statue, which still held that faint internal glow, a beacon of dormant power. "You touched the heart of it, Ud." Lyra's voice was low, hushed, filled with an ancient reverence. "You stirred what has slept for 1,000 years. The temple, it awakened around you." Alara pushed herself up, her limbs heavy but regaining sensation. She felt the lingering thrum of energy in her fingertips, a faint vibration that seemed to resonate deep within her chest. She looked at the colossal statue, its onyx eyes now seeming to hold a deeper, more understanding gaze. A profound connection remained, a silent echo of the immense sorrow and boundless longing she had felt in her unconscious state. It was a weight, yes, but also a strange, undeniable comfort, as if a part of her soul had found its way home. She looked at Lyra, her blue eyes wide with a mixture of fear and dawning comprehension. "I felt it, Lyra," Alara whispered, the words catching in her throat. "The sadness, the waiting, it was immense." Lyra nodded slowly, her hand gently stroking Alara's hair. "The statue holds the memories of the land, child. 1,000 years of stillness, 1,000 years of watching, and a great sorrow buried deep." Alara shivered, remembering the chilling cold that had given way to warmth, the vast emptiness that had filled with Norita's silent roar. She had touched something primal, something beyond her understanding, and it had left an indelible mark upon her soul. The memory of the vision, of the endless forests and the sorrowful eyes, was still vivid, painting itself across the inside of her eyelids. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the drip of water from the grotto walls and the soft rustle of Lyra adjusting the herbs. Alara felt a wave of confusion and fear. What did this mean for her? What had she truly awakened? The sense of belonging she had felt, the profound connection to the statue, was now intertwined with an overwhelming sense of dread for the unknown consequences. Her life, once a quiet, predictable rhythm of chores and solitude, had been irrevocably altered. She was no longer just Alara, the orphan temple servant. She was something more, something tied to the ancient, sleeping power of the silent wolf. This new reality pressed down on her, a weight heavier than any stone. Then a sound reached her ears, faint at first, then growing steadily louder. It was a rhythmic thudding, a muffled beat that vibrated through the ancient stones of the temple floor. Clang, thud, clang, thud. The distinct metallic ring of armor, the steady rhythm of marching feet, approaching from the temple's entrance. Alara's heart, which had just begun to settle, now leaped into a frantic beat against her ribs. Dread, cold and sharp, pierced through the lingering warmth of the temple. She knew that sound. It was the sound of Lord Kaelin's guards, the unmistakable cadence of his authority. The fear she had always carried, the fear of drawing attention, of being noticed, now clawed at her throat with a terrifying urgency. Her eyes flew to Lyra, wide and filled with a desperate question. Lyra's face grew still, her eyes clouding with a deep, resigned understanding. The ancient silence of the temple was about to be shattered completely. The rhythmic thud of heavy boots on ancient stone echoed through the sunken temple, tearing through the fragile quiet. Alara's eyes fluttered open, her head still heavy, the last vestiges of sleep clinging to her. She recognized the sound from her semi-conscious state, a premonition of dread now made stark reality. A cold wave washed over her, not from the temple's damp air, but from the sharp sting of fear. She remembered the tremor, the glow, the collapse, and then the distant, terrible march. Elder Lyra sat beside her, her gnarled hand resting gently on Alara's forehead, a silent comfort amidst the encroaching noise. The elder's lips moved, murmuring ancient words that offered little solace against the metallic clang of armor now entering the main chamber. Alara pushed herself up, wincing as a dull ache throbbed behind her eyes. Her vision swam for a moment, the torches blurring into streaks of orange light. She could taste dust and something else, something primal and earthy, on her tongue, her stomach clenched with a knot of anxiety. Lord Kaelin Thorne strode into the temple, his broad shoulders filling the archway, dwarfing the carved wolves. His presence was a physical force, pushing the very air out of the chamber. He moved with an impatient authority, his dark cloak swirling around him, the silver wolf's head sigil catching the torchlight. Behind him, a dozen elite guards fanned out, their hands resting on the hilts of their swords, their faces grim and unyielding. The air grew thick with unspoken tension, every breath held tight in Alara's chest. "Elder Lyra!" Lord Kaelin's voice boomed, cutting through the hushed reverence of the temple. It was deep and resonant, accustomed to commands carrying an edge of barely contained fury. "I trust you can explain the events of the past hours." His sharp gray eyes, usually calculating, now burned with an intensity Alara had never witnessed. He did not glance at Alara, though his gaze swept over her briefly, dismissing her as a minor detail. Elder Lyra slowly rose, leaning heavily on her polished wooden staff, her frail frame seeming to gather strength from some unseen wellspring. "Lord Kaelin," she replied, her voice calm, a stark contrast to his, but with an underlying steel. "The temple holds its secrets. They are not easily shared." She positioned herself slightly in front of Alara, a silent shield. Alara felt a tremor of gratitude, but also a deeper terror. She knew the elder could not protect her from this. "Secrets?" Kaelin scoffed, the sound echoing harshly off the ancient stones. He took a step forward, his boot falls loud and deliberate. "My scouts report earth-shattering tremors. They speak of ethereal howls that tear through the whisper wood. They describe a light, a pulse of power, emanating from this very chamber. These are not secrets, Elder. These are disturbances that threaten the stability of my domain. His hand went to the hilt of his own sword, though he did not draw it, the gesture a clear threat. Alara felt her breath catch in her throat. She looked at the colossal silent wolf statue, its obsidian-like form still and silent, yet radiating a subtle, almost imperceptible warmth. She saw the tiny, fresh cracks she had noticed earlier, now seeming to pulse with a faint internal light only she could perceive. Her head throbbed again, a dull drumbeat against her temples. She remembered the surge of energy, the forgotten images. What had she done? What chaos had she unleashed? The statue awakens as the prophecies foretold, Lyra stated, her gaze unwavering as she met Kalen's furious stare. It is not a threat to your stability, Lord. It is a sign of deeper things, a new beginning, perhaps, or an end. She spoke with a quiet conviction that grated against Kalen's pragmatism. He valued concrete answers, not cryptic pronouncements. Prophecies? Kalen's jaw tightened. He turned his attention fully to the statue, his gaze raking over its massive form, searching for an explanation, for any sign of movement. For 1,000 years, this relic has stood dormant, a symbol, nothing more. Now you tell me it awakens? And with such violence. His voice rose, edged with an authority that expected instant compliance. What caused this awakening? What have you done, Elder? His eyes narrowed, finally flicking towards Alara, who instinctively recoiled, shrinking further behind Lyra. And this girl? He demanded, his tone dismissing her as an object rather than a person. She was found unconscious at its base. Is she somehow involved in this madness? The accusation hung heavy in the air, pinning Alara in place. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like a small creature caught in a predator's gaze. Her hands trembled, her fingers locking around the tattered hem of her robes. Alara wanted to speak, to explain, but her voice felt trapped, choked by the fear constricting her throat. The memory of the power, the sheer overwhelming force that had surged through her, was too immense, too frightening to put into words. How could she explain something she barely understood herself? She was just an orphan, a temple servant. She had only touched the paw. Had that been enough? Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Lord Kalen's patience visibly frayed. He took another step, his presence dominating the space. Elder, I will have answers. This is not a request. His voice was louder now, cutting through the damp air, bouncing off the ancient walls. Tell me what has happened here. Now. The unspoken threat in his words was clear, a promise of swift, brutal consequences should Lyra refuse. The guards shifted, their armor clinking, a symphony of latent menace. As Kalen's voice reached its peak, a deep, resonant rumble reverberated through the very stones of the temple. It was not a sound from the earth, but from something within the chamber itself. Alara felt it in her bones, a low guttural growl that started deep within the colossal silent wolf statue. The sound was ancient, powerful, and utterly terrifying. It was a sound of immense, barely contained strength, a warning that made the guards falter, their confident stances wavering. Lord Kalen froze mid-sentence, his eyes widening almost imperceptibly as he stared at the statue. The growl intensified, a deep vibration that made the floor beneath Alara's worn sandals tremble. A hush fell over the chamber, broken only by the statue's thunderous voice. Then, as if awakened by Kalen's aggression, the polished onyx eyes of the silent wolf statue, once dark and lifeless, began to glow. A soft, pulsing blue light emanated from within the statue's eyes, growing steadily brighter, casting an eerie, ethereal luminescence across the ancient chamber. The light spilled onto the floor, painting the dust motes in the air with an otherworldly sheen. It was a cold, pure light, yet it radiated an immense, palpable power that made the hairs on Alara's arms stand on end. She felt a strange mixture of awe and terror, an undeniable pull toward the glowing eyes. The growl subsided, replaced by a low, humming vibration that coursed through the stone. The blue light intensified, now a steady, brilliant glow. Alara could feel the power now, Not just hear it or see it. It was a pressure in the air, a hum against her skin, an electric current that seemed to flow directly into her. She swayed, her knees feeling weak, as if the very ground was shifting beneath her. Her vision tunneled, the world narrowing to the twin blue beacons of the statue's eyes. Lord Kalen, for all his formidable presence, stood absolutely still, his sharp gaze fixed on the statue, his face a mask of profound shock. He had seen many things in his life, faced countless dangers, but this was beyond his understanding. The guards behind him shuffled nervously, some murmuring prayers under their breath, their weapons now seeming utterly useless against such an impossible phenomenon. The air grew heavy, thick with unseen energy. The ground beneath them trembled violently, not with a distant quake, but as if the temple itself was shuddering. Dust rained down from the high arches, swirling in the blue light. Alara felt a deep, resonant thrumming in her chest, mirroring the vibration from the statue. She braced herself, her small frame quivering, for what felt like an inevitable collapse. Then, with a slow, deliberate creak of ancient stone, the colossal head of the silent wolf statue began to turn. It was a majestic, impossibly slow movement, a sound that seemed to tear through 1,000 years of stillness. The guards gasped, some crying out in fear, taking immediate steps backward, their formation utterly broken. Lord Kalen remained rooted to his spot, his eyes wide, tracking the statue's impossible motion. The massive head pivoted, its glowing blue eyes sweeping past Lord Kalen and his stunned guards. It did not pause, did not acknowledge their presence. Instead, with a final, shuddering groan, the statue's gaze locked, directly and unblinkingly, upon Alara. It was a long, unwavering stare, filled with an ancient, knowing intelligence, ignoring everyone else in the chamber. The air in the temple grew heavy and cold, as if breath itself had vanished. A profound silence fell, broken only by Alara's hammering heart. The colossal black wolf statue, dormant for 1,000 years, fixed its luminous blue gaze upon her. It held an ancient quality, stirring a forgotten memory deep within her bones. Lord Kalen's guards gasped, their rigid formation shattered. Weapons clattered on ancient stone, echoing sharply in the sudden quiet. A young guard, Alara's age, stumbled backward, eyes vacant with terror. Another warrior, stoic moments before, mumbled prayers, fumbling for a holy symbol. Fear's acrid scent mingled with damp earth and old incense. Lord Kalen remained rooted, defiant amidst chaos. His jaw was clenched. His gray eyes, usually cold, now showed shock and primal curiosity. He did not flinch, yet Alara saw a slight tremor on his sword hilt. His gaze darted between statue and Alara, reconciling the impossible. This defied his understanding, the laws of his ordered world. His mind raced for an explanation, a strategy, control. Alara felt the weight of Kalen's stare and the statue's blue light. Fear receded, replaced by an insistent warmth spreading through her chest. An unfamiliar hum resonated with the statue's presence. Her breath hitched, not from terror, but a profound, unexpected homecoming. Always an orphan, an outsider, she felt truly seen under the ancient wolf's gaze. For the first time, Elder Lyra released Alara. Her aged eyes held awe, perhaps sorrow. She whispered lycanthos, her voice raspy. Alara did not understand, but felt its heavy meaning, a thread from a dawning tapestry. The air thickened with invisible energy, prickling Alara's skin. A low, deep growl vibrated through the temple, not from its throat, but its core. It began in ancient stone, a grinding protest of materials set in place. Fine, ancient dust rained from high arches, coating the floor. The air filled with the earthy scent of disturbed millennia. The sound was deliberate, an awakening. The guards cried out startled shouts and whimpers. Some scrambled backward, away from the awakening colossus. Others froze, pale, staring at the impossible. Lord Kalen, for all his will, could not hide the tension in his shoulders. He stepped back deliberately, not from fear, but to observe, to understand this impossible event. The colossal statue began to shift, a movement of immense scale and slowness, like rearranging mountains. The black, obsidian-like stone, still for 1,000 years, rippled, light playing tricks. Cracks, barely visible, deepened and expanded, glowing faintly with blue light. Ilara watched, mesmerized, breath held. A magnetic pull drew her closer, whispering promises of connection. This was instinct, a longing deeper than conscious thought. Every fiber urged her forward, towards the ancient stone, towards the profound warmth. She stepped forward, worn sandals barely disturbing dust. Her blue eyes, usually downcast, were wide with unwavering focus, reflecting the statue's glow. Her fingers, usually trembling, felt steady, eager. Her life had led to this impossible moment. Lord Kalen's sharp voice cut through the groaning stone. "Stay back, girl. Do not approach." His words held less authority, laced with desperate urgency. He knew the legends, the untamed power in ancient text. He came seeking answers, control, but this was different. The ground vibrated beneath his boots, a deep thrumming threatening his composure. He felt raw energy pressing his skin, raising the hairs on his arms. Ilara barely registered his command, the world beyond blurred. Her attention fixed on the towering form. A faint, sweet scent, like night jasmine, filled her senses, overlaying damp earth and ancient dust. It was a delicate contrast to the power, a note of comfort. She recognized this scent, a forgotten fragment suddenly vivid. The statue's groaning intensified, a deep symphony of stone and power. The sound rose from the temple's foundations, echoing off vaulted ceilings. Cracks spiderwebbed across the chamber floor, radiating from the statue's base. Small pieces of ancient stone chipped away, falling like dark tears, scattering around its base. Each fragment carried a tiny spark of blue light, winking out. One guard, Thomas, known for his stoicism, cried out, pointing a trembling finger. "It is moving, truly moving." His voice was high-pitched, filled with terror that ripped through any order. His face was a mask of disbelief and fear, eyes wide, fixed on the impossible. Raw power emanated, pressing down on everyone, stealing breath and will. Elder Lyra, her face a tapestry of wisdom and dread, lowered herself to her knees. Her gnarled hands clasped before her, lips moving in silent prayer. Her gaze fixed not on the statue, but on Ilara, profound sadness mingling with knowing understanding in her aged eyes. She had seen the signs, understood prophecies, yet witnessing it firsthand was overwhelming, a lifetime's vigil culminating. Ilara felt tremors beneath her feet, deep and resonant, like the earth's heartbeat. She felt a connection to that pulse, a rhythm her own. The air grew warmer, a gentle heat chasing away the temple's chill, a comforting embrace. She reached out a hesitant hand, not to touch, but for an unseen thread connecting them, a silent communication across millennia. The statue's shoulders, broad and carved with faded symbols, began to lower. Its immense head, still fixed on Ilara, dipped. It was a slow, deliberate motion, each moment an eternity. Groaning stone grew louder, a deep bass note vibrating through Ilara's bones. She felt the shift in equilibrium, the immense weight of the colossus changing posture, stealing the air from her lungs. Lord Kalen stood frozen, a statue himself, eyes narrowed, scrutinizing every detail. He was a man of logic, strategy, and maneuvering, but this defied all principles. This was raw, ancient power, an enigma in obsidian. He believed power could be understood, controlled. This challenged that, revealing magic and connection he dismissed as myth. His vision of an ordered domain seemed terribly fragile. A thought flickered, a lonely cub, shivering in a cold forest, seeking warmth. It was her childhood memory, linked to the ancient wolf, a shared yearning. A single tear traced a warm path down her cheek, born not of fear, but an overwhelming emotion of sorrow and profound hope. She was not alone. She had never been truly alone. The statue's front legs, massive black stone columns, began to bend. The joints, previously indistinguishable, now articulated, forming slow, ponderous angles. The movement was impossibly graceful for such an immense object, a slow, majestic descent. Grinding stone was almost deafening, filling the chamber, making thought and breath difficult. The air shimmered with blue light, reflected from the statue's glowing eyes and expanding cracks. "What is this sorcery?" whispered Jack, a guard, his voice hoarse with disbelief. He had served Kalen for years, seen battles and creatures, but nothing like this. His fingers clutched his dropped sword, but he made no move to retrieve it, eyes glued to the impossible. The scale of the statue's movement, defying known physics, was too much to comprehend. Lord Kalen, grim-faced, forced himself to focus. He had to understand what this meant for Alara, for his domain. Legends spoke of the silent wolf as guardian, protector, and bringer of great change. He watched Alara, her small form bathed in blue light, her face wrapped with an emotion he could not name. He saw her tear, glinting in the glow, and for a fleeting moment, wonder crossed his stern features. Alara's heart pounded, a frantic drum, yet she felt no urge to flee. Instead, peace settled, a quiet understanding blossoming. This was meant to be. This impossible connection was her destiny. She felt profound gratitude, a wave of warmth as if the statue embraced her. Cold loneliness melted, replaced by an intoxicating sense of belonging. The statue continued its slow, majestic descent. The ground vibrated more intensely, a deep tremor making the temple groan. More dust fell, thick and swirling, creating a hazy blue-tinged mist around the statue's base. The air was thick with ancient stone and a metallic tang, like ozone after lightning, a scent of immense power unleashed. Elder Lyra, still kneeling, closed her eyes, lips moving faster, reciting ancient verses, prayers to forgotten deities. Her voice was barely a whisper, but carried undeniable weight, a desperate plea. She knew the history, the price of awakening such a force, and her heart ached for the girl caught in its embrace. Alara stretched her hand out further, unconsciously, instinctively, toward the immense stone paw drawing closer to the floor. Her fingers twitched, yearning to make contact, to complete the connection. The blue light from the statue's eyes pulsed rhythmically, mirroring her own heart, a living pulse. She felt an overwhelming surge of compassion, a sorrow both ancient and personal, as if the statue mourned a lost connection. Lord Kalen watched with almost predatory intensity. He saw the girl's outstretched hand, her face softened by an emotion he found baffling, captivating. He saw the statue's unwavering gaze, its deliberate movement towards her. This was not coincidence. This was a deliberate act, a profound communication. He knew with chilling certainty that the destiny of his domain, perhaps his own, was linked to this orphan girl in the ancient power. The magnificent wolf, carved from darkest stone, continued its slow, deliberate bending. Its forelegs, fully articulated, lowered further, bringing the colossal head closer to the temple floor. Groaning rock echoed one last time, a resonant, deep chord shaking the ancient place. Blue light from its eyes intensified, casting long, dancing shadows across Alara's mesmerized face. With a final deep groan of ancient stone, the silent wolf statue bent its forelegs, its massive form slowly descending towards the temple floor, directly before a wide-eyed Alara. The massive stone form descended with agonizing slowness, each creaking joint a thunderous echo in the suddenly hushed temple. Dust billowed from its ancient shoulders, catching the pale blue glow of its eyes, forming a shimmering veil around its impossibly bending limbs. Alara stood rooted to the spot, her breath trapped in her throat, watching the impossible unfold directly before her. The world seemed to hold its breath, 1,000 years of silence, shattering with the deliberate, grinding motion of the colossal wolf. Its forelegs bent, then its powerful hindquarters followed, the sound of ancient stone on stone resonating through the very foundations of the temple. Lord Kalen stood frozen, a statue himself, his sharp gray eyes wide with an emotion that bordered on disbelief. His jaw was clenched so tightly his teeth ached, but no sound escaped his lips. The unyielding confidence he always carried had shattered into 1,000 fragments, scattered across the damp temple floor. He had commanded armies and faced down rebellions. Yet this act, this silent, impossible genuflection, stole every word from his mind. His elite guards, usually a disciplined phalanx, were a chaotic mess of shifted weight and muttered prayers. Some dropped their weapons with a clatter, their faces pale, their eyes fixed on the humbling beast. Their world, built on order and steel, had just crumbled before their very sight. Elder Lyra, usually so composed, swayed slightly, leaning heavily on her gnarled staff. Her weathered face, often a mask of stern wisdom, was now etched with a profound sorrow, her lips moving in a silent, ancient prayer. She had spoken of prophecies, of awakenings, but even she could not have foreseen this exact, humbling display. Her gaze flickered between the kneeling wolf and Alara, a deep, knowing pain settling in her old eyes. She understood the immense burden that had just been placed upon the girl. Alara felt the weight of every single one of those eyes upon her, the yes of the living and the ancient, all converging on her small, worn figure. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage, each beat echoing the rhythmic grind of the statue's descent. A strange, almost electric current buzzed beneath her skin, a tingling sensation that began at her fingertips and spread through her entire body. It was a fusion of icy dread and a warmth that felt like home, both terrifying and utterly familiar. The air around her thickened, growing heavy with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic and profoundly ancient, like old blood and forgotten iron. The blue light from the statue's eyes intensified, pulsing gently, casting long, dancing shadows across the temple's crumbling walls. Alara watched, mesmerized, as the colossal head, once held high in eternal vigilance, slowly, majestically lowered itself. It was a motion of profound reverence, a bowing that spoke volumes without a single sound. Her throat tightened, a sudden, unexpected sob catching there. It was not a sob of fear, not entirely, but of an overwhelming complex emotion she could not name. It was the weight of 1,000 years, a connection she had never sought but now undeniably felt. This ancient, powerful being, worshipped by generations, was bowing to her. A simple, orphan temple servant, forgotten by almost everyone. The sheer impossibility of it brought a fresh wave of tears to her eyes, hot and stinging as they traced paths down her dust-streaked cheeks. A whisper echoed deep within her mind, not a voice she heard with her ears, but a feeling, a resonance that vibrated through her very bones. Daughter, it was a word pregnant with meaning, with history, with a bond that transcended time and blood. It was an ancestral recognition, an echo of something buried deep within her lineage, a secret gene that had stirred awake. The feeling was so intense, so deeply personal, that her knees almost buckled beneath her. The statue's head finally settled, its massive, obsidian-like snout resting gently on the damp stone floor, directly before Alara's feet. Its glowing blue eyes, now level with her own, stared at her with an intensity that pierced through her very soul. They held a sorrow that mirrored her own, an ancient pain, but also a deep, unwavering loyalty that brought a tremor to her lips. She could feel its ancient spirit, a presence both fierce and gentle, acknowledging her, choosing her. Lord Kalen took an involuntary step forward, his hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of his sword, though he knew any weapon against this force would be useless. His mind raced, struggling to comprehend the implications of what he was seeing. This was not merely an awakening. This was an oath, a coronation. The silent wolf, the symbol of his dominion, the mythical protector of his lands, had chosen a new master. And that master was a 17-year-old girl, a temple orphan, who stood there weeping silently. His carefully constructed world of power and control threatened to unravel. The legends spoke of the wolf's unwavering loyalty once given. What did this mean for him, for his rule, if the ancient protector now bowed to another? His gaze, usually cold and calculating, flickered with a raw, undeniable anger, mixed with a chilling threat of fear. He felt a profound sense of usurpation, as if his very authority had been stripped bare in this hallowed chamber. The guards exchanged fearful glances, their whispers growing louder, though still hushed. They knew the legends, the stories of the silent wolf, and the power it represented. To see it kneel was to witness the impossible, a sign from the gods themselves. Some fell to their knees, bowing their heads in reverence, convinced they were in the presence of a sacred miracle. Others gripped their weapons tighter, their eyes darting between Alara, the wolf, and their stunned lord. They awaited Kalen's command, yet he seemed unable to give one. Elder Lyra's eyes, however, held no shock, only a deep resignation. She had seen the signs, read the ancient texts, but to witness it firsthand was still a profound experience. Her heart ached for Alara, for the path now laid before her, a path of immense power and crushing responsibility. The prophecies were unfolding, not as vague pronouncements, but as a living, breathing reality. She watched Alara with a profound tenderness, a silent plea for strength. Alara felt the ancient stone beneath the wolf's head hum with a new, vibrant energy. The sorrow in its glowing eyes seemed to deepen, but also a quiet sense of purpose, a mission that was now hers. Her own tears, once born of shock and confusion, now felt like a cleansing rain, washing away years of loneliness and doubt. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, truly chosen, truly belonging. Yet the sheer magnitude of it all was overwhelming, a weight that threatened to crush her fragile frame. A ripple of warmth spread from her chest, tingling outwards, meeting the ancient energy radiating from the wolf. It was as if two long-separated halves had finally found each other, completing a circuit that had lain dormant for centuries. The air around them shimmered, not with heat, but with an almost visible wave of primal power, a sense of immense, untapped force. This was more than just a statue. This was a living, breathing spirit, ancient and wise. Lord Kalen's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his fingernails digging into his palms. He watched the subtle dance of light and energy between the girl and the wolf, a silent, intimate connection that excluded him entirely. The sight infuriated him, even as it intrigued him. He had always been the one in control, the one who held the power. Now, in his own temple, before his own guards, an orphan girl had eclipsed him, becoming the focal point of an ancient, potent force. This would not stand. He would understand this power, and he would control it. Alara, lost in the mesmerizing blue depths of the wolf's eyes, felt a sudden urgent shift in its energy. The sorrow intensified, becoming a plea, a silent call for action. It was as if the wolf was asking for something, something only she could provide. Her gaze dropped from its eyes to the stone directly beneath its head, a sense of anticipation building within her. The air grew colder, even as the strange warmth inside her intensified. A low, resonant groan, deeper than any sound the statue had made before, vibrated through the floor. It was a mechanical sound, the grinding of ancient gears and hinges that had been sealed for 1,000 years. Everyone present felt it, a rumble that shook the very ground beneath their feet, threatening to topple the crumbling pillars. Their eyes, wide with renewed wonder and fear, snapped to the space directly beneath the wolf's bowed head. The stone panel, previously indistinguishable from the rest of the temple floor, began to move. Slowly, agonizingly, it shifted, groaning as if waking from an impossibly deep slumber. Dust and small fragments of rock showered down from its edges, revealing a dark, yawning crevice beneath. The sound was like a giant beast stirring, its slumber broken by the will of the ancient wolf and the presence of the chosen girl. A gasp went through the guards, a collective intake of breath that momentarily broke the silence. Lord Kalen's eyes narrowed, his previous shock giving way to a fierce, almost predatory curiosity. This was it, the sealed secret, the hidden power he had sought to understand for so long. And it was opening now, not for him, but for her, because of her. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, yet he could not tear his gaze away. Elder Lyra pressed her lips together, her frail hands tightening on her staff. Her eyes, filled with a mixture of dread and a terrible knowing, fixed on the opening crevice. The prophecy spoke of this moment, of the opening and what it would unleash. Her heart pounded with a premonition of immense change, of a world irrevocably altered. The panel continued to grind open, revealing not a treasure chamber filled with gold, not ancient scrolls or weapons, but something far more unsettling. From the dark depths beneath the wolf, a swirling mass began to coalesce. It was not solid, not liquid, but pure energy, a vortex of shadow and faint, ethereal light. It pulsed with a silent, rhythmic beat, like a hidden heart, drawing all eyes into its mesmerizing, terrible beauty. The shadowy light within the vortex swirled and danced, an otherworldly spectacle that defied explanation. It seemed to absorb the ambient light of the temple, creating a pocket of profound darkness that was somehow also luminous. The air around it grew colder, raising goosebumps on Alara's arms, even as the strange warmth inside her intensified. It was a paradox, a chilling heat, a luminous darkness, a primal energy that spoke of both creation and destruction. The vortex spun faster, its shadowy tendrils reaching out, beckoning, calling. The swirling vortex of shadowy light beckoned from the open base of the silent wolf statue. It shimmered with an ancient power, not truly dark, but deep and unknowable, a living darkness that seemed to drink the very air around it. Ilara felt an almost unbearable pull, a primal tug deep within her bones, drawing her closer to its mysterious depths. A voice, faint at first, then growing clearer, whispered within her mind, a sound without words, yet utterly distinct, calling her name. Her breath hitched in her throat as she stared into the abyss. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs, echoing the pulse of the shadowy light. This was not the familiar warmth of the temple, nor the comforting coolness of stone. This was something else entirely, something vast and timeless, stirring awake after 1,000 years of slumber. Her eyes, usually downcast, were now wide and fixed, reflecting the swirling energy before her. She took a hesitant step forward, her worn sandals barely scraping the damp stone floor. Every fiber of her being screamed to approach, to reach out, to immerse herself in that shimmering unknown. It felt like coming home, a home she had never known but always yearned for, a missing piece of her own soul finally presenting itself. A tear traced a path down her cheek, not of sadness, but of a profound, overwhelming recognition that shook her to her core. She felt a profound sense of connection, as if the vortex was an extension of herself, or perhaps she an extension of it. Across the chamber, Lord Kalen Thorne stood frozen for a single agonizing moment, his formidable composure utterly shattered. The sight of the kneeling statue had been one thing, a miracle defying all reason. This swirling void, however, was another entirely. His shock, a rare emotion for him, quickly gave way to a cold, calculated comprehension. His eyes narrowed, stripping away the awe, replacing it with the sharp gleam of strategic analysis. He knew this sight, not from personal experience, but from the oldest, most guarded texts within Blackwood Keep. This was no mere hidden chamber or forgotten relic. This was the legendary heart of Lycanthos, a sealed secret whispered in hushed tones among scholars and warlords for centuries. It was the source of untold power, capable of forging empires or plunging the world into an eternal twilight. He recognized its pulsating, ethereal glow, the silent hum that resonated through the ancient stone, a song of creation and destruction. His mind raced, piecing together fragments of prophecy and ancient lore, his gaze never leaving the mesmerizing vortex. It was a power he had long sought to understand, to perhaps even control for the stability and prosperity of his domain. But he had always believed it was an abstract concept, a myth, not a tangible entity lurking beneath a temple floor. He swallowed hard, the implications of its presence and its sudden emergence washing over him like a cold tide. The guards, still reeling from the statue's impossible genuflection, were now paralyzed by a new, more primal fear. Their weapons, once held ready for battle, now hung loosely in their trembling hands. Their eyes darted from the kneeling, colossal wolf to the swirling maelstrom, then to their leader, their faces pale with a terror that bordered on superstitious dread. They muttered low prayers, their faith shaken to its very foundations by the sheer impossibility of the events unfolding before them. Elder Lyra, however, seemed to find a grim resignation in the vortex's appearance. Her frail body swayed slightly, but her gaze, though troubled, was less surprised than Kalen's. She murmured ancient words under her breath, a lament or a prayer, her eyes filled with a sorrowful wisdom that suggested she had always known this day would come. She watched Alara, her expression a complex mixture of protective love and profound apprehension. Lord Kalen's calculating gaze swept over the scene, assessing every detail. The fear in his guard's eyes, the elder's quiet despair, and most importantly, Alara. He saw her drawn to the vortex like a moth to a flame, her small frame radiating an energy that seemed to resonate with the ancient power. Her presence had woken the statue, her touch had made it kneel. Now the sealed secret, the heart of Lycanthos itself, pulsed in response to her. A realization, sharp and undeniable, pierced through his strategic mind. Alara was not just a temple servant, not just an orphan girl. She was undeniably the key to this ancient, potent force. Without her, the statue remained inert. Without her, the vortex would likely have remained forever sealed. She held the power, whether she understood it or not, to unleash or perhaps even command this unimaginable energy. His desire for control, for stability, now centered entirely upon her. "Hold your positions," he commanded, his voice cutting through the stunned silence like a sharp blade. It was a low growl, but it carried an unyielding authority that snapped some of the guards back to attention, even if their eyes still held a haunted look. "Do not move. Do not approach." His words were for his men, but his gaze remained locked on Alara, who was now just a few feet from the shimmering vortex, her hand outstretched. He saw the longing in her eyes, the unconscious yearning to connect with the swirling light. He saw the potential for catastrophe, for a power unleashed without guidance or understanding. He also saw an opportunity, a chance to harness something that could redefine the very fabric of their world. The thought was a dangerous one, thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. But Kaelin Thorne had never shied away from danger when the stakes were this high. Alara felt the whispers grow louder, weaving a tapestry of forgotten memories and half-formed images in her mind. She saw a vast starlit sky, ancient trees reaching to touch constellations, and the silent, watchful eyes of countless wolves. It was a world both wild and sacred, a connection to something primordial that resonated deeply with her isolated soul. She felt tears welling in her eyes again, blurring her vision of the pulsating light, yet making it feel even more real. She was almost there, her fingertips tingling with anticipation, drawn by an invisible thread woven from magic and destiny. The air around the vortex tasted of ozone and something sweet, like forgotten rain on dry earth. She could feel the power thrumming through her veins, answering the call of the heart of Lycanthos, completing a circuit that had been broken for 1,000 years. Her heart raced, a drumbeat for the awakening world. Just as her hand hovered inches from the shimmering surface, a sudden heavy weight descended upon her shoulder. It was a touch that was both firm and unyielding, stopping her mid-reach. The warmth of a hand, broad and strong, replaced the ethereal pull of the vortex. The whispering voice in her mind, so clear a moment before, suddenly dimmed, pushed back by the undeniable presence beside her. Lord Kaelin Thorne had moved with a swiftness that belied his imposing size. He now stood purposefully between Alara and the swirling abyss, his body a formidable barrier. His fingers clamped around her shoulder, not painfully, but with an iron grip that left no room for defiance or further movement. She gasped, torn from her trance, her head snapping up to meet his gaze. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, now gleamed with a new, unsettling resolve. They held a depth she had never seen before, a mixture of stark authority, fierce determination, and something else, something predatory and possessive. In that moment, the vortex, the statue, even the trembling guards faded into the background. All that remained was the weight of his hand, the intensity of his stare, and the chilling realization that her destiny, once her own, was now inextricably bound to his will. Lord Kaelin's hand was a heavy weight on Alara's shoulder, a firm, possessive grip that seemed to sear through her worn tunic. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, now gleamed with a focused, unsettling intensity that promised no argument. She felt the raw, powerful energy of the vortex thrumming behind her, a magnetic pull that resonated deep within her bones, a call she instinctively wanted to answer. But Kaelin stood between her and whatever ancient truth lay waiting, a solid wall of human will and unyielding authority. "This girl," Kaelin announced, his voice echoing with a new dangerous clarity throughout the temple chamber. He did not raise his voice, yet every word carried the weight of an unbreakable command, silencing even the soft drip of water from the mossy stones. "From this moment forward, Alara Vance is under my direct guardianship. She will reside at Blackwood Keep." Alara's breath caught in her throat, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. The words struck her like a physical blow, severing her connection to the ancient space she had always known as home. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs, echoing the hum of the vortex that still swirled with shadowed light just beyond Kaelin's imposing form. She wanted to protest, to pull away, but his grip remained unyielding, a silent threat. The smell of damp earth and ancient stones suddenly felt suffocating, trapping her in a future she could not comprehend. "It is for her protection," Kalen continued, his gaze sweeping over the wide-eyed guards, then settling for a moment on Elder Lyra, who stood frozen in a mixture of shock and dawning horror. "She has awakened forces beyond her understanding, forces that, if left unchecked, could tear this land asunder." His words were a logical, undeniable declaration of power, leaving no room for dissent in their carefully measured cadence. He spoke of protection, but Alara heard only imprisonment. Elder Lyra, however, found her voice, a sharp, indignant cry that pierced the solemn atmosphere. "Protection? You speak of protection, Lord Kalen, when you would rip her from the very sanctuary that nurtured her? This is sacrilege. She is a child of this temple, a vessel chosen by forces far older than any kingdom, any lord." Her gnarled fingers trembled as she gestured wildly towards the still kneeling silent wolf, its vast stone head bowed in a silent, eternal vigil. Her voice, usually a calm murmur, now quivered with genuine outrage and desperate fear. Kalen merely turned his head slightly, his gaze unwavering, dismissing Lyra's words with a subtle shift of his posture. "Her connection to this place is precisely why she must be removed. The heart of Lycanthos is not a plaything for a temple servant, no matter how unique her bond." He tightened his grip on Alara's shoulder, a silent warning to both her and the elder. Alara felt a wave of nausea wash over her, the weight of his hand a physical manifestation of her lost freedom. The vortex behind her seemed to mock her, its swirling darkness promising answers she would now never reach. Lyra's eyes, though clouded by age, blazed with a fierce, protective fire. "You misunderstand, my lord. You threaten to disturb a balance 1,000 years in the making. This girl is not merely connected. She is the sacred trust itself. The legends speak of curses, of ancient retribution for those who attempt to wield what is not theirs to control." Her voice rose, filled with an ancient, forgotten weight. "The statue kneels for her, Kalen, not for your ambition. This is a sign, a prophecy unfolding before our very eyes. Do you truly believe you can command the will of the silent wolf?" Kalen's lips thinned, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face, but his resolve held firm. "Legends are whispers, elder. Power is concrete. The wolf may have bowed, but the girl now serves a greater purpose. A purpose I will define for the good of my people, for the stability of my domain." He spoke with the cold, unfeeling logic of a ruler accustomed to bending reality to his will, utterly deaf to the spiritual pleas of the elder. Alara felt like an object, a tool discussed between two powerful wills, stripped of any agency. The thought sent a chilling tremor through her. Her mind raced, a frantic whirl of images, her tiny cot in the temple alcove, the familiar smell of old parchment and beeswax, the comforting, cool touch of the statue's base during her solitary moments. All of it was dissolving, being ripped away. She looked at Lyra, her eyes pleading for help, for some way out of this sudden, terrible pronouncement. Lyra met her gaze, a profound sadness etched into every line of her face, a silent apology for a fate she could not avert. The old woman's hands clenched, her knuckles white, her breath coming in ragged gasps of indignation. "You tread on hallowed ground, Kalen," Lyra whispered, her voice now hoarse with desperation, a stark contrast to Kalen's steady tones. "The ancient pacts are not to be broken. You invite chaos, not order, by defying the very will of the wolf. This is a betrayal of the deepest kind." Her words hung in the damp air, heavy with unspoken doom, but Kalen merely offered a dismissive wave of his free hand. He was a force of nature, unyielding and focused, his will absolute. "Enough, elder," Kalen commanded, his voice hardening, leaving no room for further argument. He looked at two of his guards, burly men with grim, impassive faces. "Escort the girl, gently but swiftly. We depart for Blackwood Keep immediately." The command was direct, cutting through the last vestiges of hope Alora clung to. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, her secure, if lonely existence abruptly shattered. Her fingers locked around Kalen's arm, a last desperate attempt to anchor herself to the present. The guards stepped forward, their heavy boots scuffing on the ancient stone floor. One of them, a man with a scarred cheek and surprisingly gentle eyes, reached out and took Alara's arm. His grip was not cruel, but it was firm, leaving no doubt about her lack of choice. Alara felt a sudden, profound surge of terror. She was being led away, away from the only home she had ever known, away from the mysterious, comforting presence of the silent wolf, away from the vortex that pulsed with answers she might never find. Her eyes darted back to the kneeling statue, its onyx gaze now dark and still, the blue light having faded. It sat in a posture of profound submission, its head bowed, yet somehow it still radiated an immense, sorrowful power. The open compartment at its base, the heart of Lacanthus, continued to swirl with shadowed light, a silent, gaping maw of destiny. A silent scream tore through Alara's mind, a desperate plea to the stone beast. Don't let them take me. Don't let them take me from you. But the statue remained motionless, a silent, unmoving guardian of a forgotten truth. Alara's feet dragged, her steps heavy with an unbearable sense of loss. Each movement away from the statue felt like a tearing, a painful separation from an invisible tether that had bound her to this place since birth. The familiar scent of damp earth and ancient incense began to fade, replaced by the sharper, metallic tang of the guard's armor and the cold air that now swept into the temple from the entrance. She risked a glance back at Elder Lyra, who stood by the statue, her shoulders slumped in defeat, her face a mask of profound sorrow. Lyra's lips moved, forming silent words that Alara could not hear, but she knew they were a blessing, a farewell, a desperate hope. A single tear traced a path down Lyra's weathered cheek, reflecting the faint, distant light from the vortex. Alara felt a mirroring tear escape her own eye, cold against her skin. It was a shared moment of despair, a silent acknowledgement of their powerlessness in the face of Kalen's unyielding will. The guard's hand on her arm was a steady pressure, guiding her towards the temple entrance, away from the glowing vortex and the bowed wolf. The flickering torchlight cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to swallow the familiar carvings on the walls, making them alien and menacing. The air grew colder with every step, a chilling premonition of the future awaiting her. She could feel the stares of the remaining guards, their eyes watchful, their expressions unreadable. She felt exposed, vulnerable, an object of intense scrutiny and concern. Her world had always been contained within these ancient, hallowed walls. The routines, the quiet solitude, the silent understanding with the statue, these were the constants of her existence. Now all of it was being stripped away, leaving her adrift in a sea of uncertainty. She was leaving the only place where she had ever felt truly inexplicably connected to something larger than herself. The wolf had knelt for her, had recognized her, and now she was being taken away. An ironic twist of fate that felt like a cruel joke. The soft hum of the vortex began to recede, a faint memory already. The colossal form of the silent wolf statue still kneeling, slowly diminished in her vision, becoming a dark, indistinct shape against the distant temple wall. Its bowed head, which had once filled her with such awe and wonder, now seemed to represent a broken promise, a silent farewell. Alara's chest ached with a profound, unutterable grief, a heavy weight that pressed down on her lungs, making it hard to breathe. She could not help but cast one last, tearful glance back at the kneeling silent wolf, its dark form a poignant silhouette in the deepening shadows of the temple. The light from the heart of Lycanthos still pulsed faintly from beneath at its base, a distant beacon of the mystery she was now being pulled away from. She felt a profound connection severed, a vital part of her soul torn away, leaving an aching void. The ancient walls seemed to whisper their goodbyes, and a new, uncertain future, cold and unknown, stretched endlessly before her, a terrifying, desolate landscape. The iron gates of Blackwood Keep groaned shut behind Alara, a sound like a tomb sealing itself away. Dust motes danced in the last rays of fading sunlight, now fractured by the tall, unforgiving battlements. She felt the heavy silence descend, a different kind of quiet than the temple's ancient hush, this one laden with the unspoken weight of stone and power. The air here was sharp with the scent of cold iron and hearth smoke, a stark contrast to the damp earth and ancient incense she had always known. Her worn temple robes, so comforting in their familiarity, now felt like a fragile shell against the raw, unyielding presence of this fortress. Each step deeper into the keep's shadowed halls was a further descent into a future she had not chosen. Guards, their faces unreadable beneath their helms, flanked her, their measured footsteps echoing on the stone. The sheer scale of Blackwood Keep, with its towering walls and vast, empty corridors, dwarfed her. She had lived a life of quiet purpose within the temple's embrace, a world of sacred duty and whispered prayers. Now she was merely an object of curiosity, a puzzle piece Lord Kalen sought to fit into his grand design. A profound sorrow settled in her chest, a leaden weight that made each breath a struggle. Her blue eyes, usually brimming with a quiet resilience, were now clouded with unshed tears, reflecting the flickering torchlight as she was led through endless passages. They brought her to a chamber high in one of the keep's turrets. It was larger than any room she had ever occupied, with a heavy, polished wooden door and a single narrow window overlooking the vast, dark expanse of the Blackwood Valley. The furniture was rich, though austere, a carved bed, a sturdy table, and a heavy chest. Yet it felt less like a comfort and more like a cage, gilded though it might be. She walked to the window, pressing her hand against the cold stone, imagining the distant gleam of the sunken temple hidden deep within the whisperwood. A tremor ran through her, a desperate longing for the familiar dampness, the faint scent of moss, the quiet presence of the silent wolf. She was truly alone here. The sound of footsteps outside her door jolted her, making her heart leap against her ribs. The heavy door swung inward, revealing Lord Kalen. He entered with the quiet authority she had come to expect, his gray eyes sweeping over her, assessing. A faint aroma of leather and something vaguely metallic, like freshly drawn steel, accompanied him. He did not smile. He rarely did. "Alara," he stated, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to fill the room. He took a few steps closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "You find yourself in new surroundings." She turned from the window, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I find myself a prisoner, Lord Kalen." Her voice was barely a whisper, yet it carried the sting of her pain. He regarded her for a long moment. "A harsh word, Alara. You are a guest, a most important one. You are under my personal protection." His tone was even, betraying no emotion, yet she could feel the steel beneath his words. "The forces you stirred in the temple are powerful, unpredictable. They demand supervision." Alara lifted her gaze, meeting his, a flicker of defiance entering her eyes. "I stirred nothing. The statue chose to act. It chose me." Kalen's expression remained impassive. "Indeed, and that choice makes you unique. It makes you a key, Alara, a key to power beyond imagining, or to destruction beyond reckoning." He paused, his gaze piercing. "Such a key cannot be left lying in the dust of a forgotten temple." He began to pace slowly, his heavy boots making soft thuds on the stone floor. "For 1,000 years, the silent wolf stood as a symbol, a legend. Now it moves, it spikes in its own whim, and it bows to you. That is not merely curiosity, Alara. That is destiny. And destiny, if left untended, can be a dangerous thing." A cold dread began to coil in Alara's stomach. She sensed his true intentions, hidden beneath his talk of protection and destiny. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Kalen had stopped his pacing, turning back to face her fully. His eyes, in the low light, seemed to glint with an unsettling intelligence. "I want understanding. I want control. The heart of Lycanthos, the sealed secret beneath the statue, is a force that could reshape our world. It could bring untold prosperity, or it could tear apart the very fabric of our domain." He gestured vaguely toward the window, as if encompassing the entire kingdom. "My duty is to ensure the former and prevent the latter." He took another step, closing the distance between them slightly. "You are the one who woke the statue. You are the one it knelt before. You are the one who felt the pull of the vortex. You are the living conduit to that power, Alara. My intention is to study that connection, to understand how it works, how it can be guided, how it can be mastered." Alara felt a sudden chill, a sense of being stripped bare, her innermost being laid out for inspection. "You mean you intend to use me?" she whispered, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. Kalen raised an eyebrow, a flicker of something like amusement in his eyes, quickly suppressed. "I intend to harness a force for the good of all, Alara, and you, it seems, are an integral part of that force. Think of it as a collaboration. We will work together. You possess the unique ability to interact with this ancient power. I possess the resources, the knowledge, the strategic mind to apply it." He moved closer still, his imposing presence filling her vision. His voice dropped slightly, becoming more intense. "The legends speak of the heart of Lycanthos not just awakening, but being controlled, being directed. They say it can be a shield or a sword, and you, Alara, are the only one who might wield it, not merely to awaken it, but to truly command its purpose." Her heart throbbed with a mixture of fear and a strange, unwelcome surge of recognition. There was an undeniable truth in his words, a cold logic that resonated with the profound energy she had felt. She was a key, but now she understood Kalen sought not just to unlock the door, but to seize the entire treasure. "What if I refuse?" she asked, her voice gaining a surprising strength. The words felt like a defiance, a small act of rebellion in this gilded cage. Kalen's lips thinned. "Refusal is not an option, Alara. Not for the sake of this domain. Not for your own safety." His eyes held hers, unwavering. "There are many who would seek such power, many who would not be as gentle in their methods as I. Here you are safe, here you will be guided." The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air, chilling her to the bone. He would protect her, yes, but only as a valuable tool, a possession. Her freedom, her destiny, her very self felt suspended in a delicate balance, precariously held in his powerful hands. "Your comfort will be attended to," he continued, his tone returning to its formal cadence. "You will want for nothing save for your unsupervised wanderings. Guards will be posted. Their presence is for your security, not your imprisonment." The lie was so thinly veiled it was almost insulting. He turned to leave, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the room. He paused at the door, his hand on the latch. "Consider your position, Alara. Consider the potential. We stand at the precipice of a new era. You, whether you wish it or not, are at its very heart." With that, he exited, the heavy door thudding shut behind him, the sound echoing through the room, then fading into the keep's oppressive silence. The clink of armor, the murmur of voices, told her the guards were already in place. She was alone again, but not truly. She was watched, contained. A new kind of temple, one built for control rather than reverence. A profound loneliness washed over her, a wave of despair so strong it brought hot tears to her eyes. She covered her face with her hands, letting the silent sobs rack her slender frame. The dream of freedom, of understanding her connection to the statue on her own terms, seemed to dissipate like mist in the strong winds of Kalen's ambition. She pictured Elder Lyra, her worried face, her ancient wisdom. What would she say? What guidance could she offer now? As the initial wave of grief subsided, Alara slowly lowered her hands. Her fingers brushed against something cool and smooth in the pocket of her temple robe. It was a small, perfectly round stone, dark and slightly damp, that she had instinctively picked up from the temple floor just before the guards had led her away. It smelled faintly of moss and ancient earth, a tiny piece of her old world, her true world, smuggled into this fortress of iron and stone. She clutched it tightly, feeling its smooth surface against her palm. A spark ignited within her, small but steady, burning away the despair. This was not the end. It was merely a different path, a forced detour. Lord Kaelin saw her as a key, a conduit, a means to an end. He saw the power she might wield, but he did not see her. He did not see the quiet strength, the fierce determination that had allowed her to survive a lifetime of solitude. He did not see the deep, intuitive connection that went beyond mere mechanics. He had taken her body, but her spirit, her mind, remained her own. She looked out the window again, at the vast, dark landscape stretching beneath the moon. The keep might be formidable, Kaelin might be cunning, But the silent wolf had bowed to her. It had chosen her, and she would not simply be a tool in another person's hand. Clenching the small, smooth stone tightly in her fist, Allura made a silent promise to herself. She would uncover the truth of her connection. She would unravel the secrets of the heart of Lycanthos, and she would reclaim her own destiny, no matter the cost, no matter how long it took. What would you have done? One line in the comments. Let's argue it out together. Where did the story catch you? Which scene made you stop and think? A small like is a small move, but it's a big support for this channel. See you in the next story, Sherman. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The iron gates of Blackwood Keep groan shut behind Allura, a sound like a tomb sealing itself away. Dust motes danced in the last rays of fading sunlight, now fractured by the tall, unforgiving battlements. She felt the heavy silence descend, a different kind of quiet than the temple's ancient hush. This one laden with the unspoken weight of stone and power. The air here was sharp with the scent of cold iron and hearth smoke, a stark contrast to the damp earth and ancient incense she had always known. Her worn temple robes, so comforting in their familiarity, now felt like a fragile shell against the raw, unyielding presence of this fortress. Each step deeper into the keep's shadowed halls was a further descent into a future she had not chosen. Guards, their faces unreadable beneath their helms, flanked her, their measured footsteps echoing on the stone. The sheer scale of Blackwood Keep, with its towering walls and vast, empty corridors, dwarfed her. She had lived a life of quiet purpose within the temple's embrace, a world of sacred duty and whispered prayers. Now she was merely an object of curiosity, a puzzle piece Lord Kalen sought to fit into his grand design. A profound sorrow settled in her chest, a leaden weight that made each breath a struggle. Her blue eyes, usually brimming with a quiet resilience, were now clouded with unshed tears, reflecting the flickering torchlight as she was led through endless passages. They brought her to a chamber high in one of the keep's turrets. It was larger than any room she had ever occupied, with a heavy, polished wooden door and a single narrow window overlooking the vast, dark expanse of the Blackwood Valley. The furniture was rich, though austere, a carved bed, a sturdy table, and a heavy chest. Yet it felt less like a comfort and more like a palm, gilded though it might be. She walked to the window, pressing her hand against the cold stone, imagining the distant gleam of the sunken temple hidden deep within the whisperwood. A tremor ran through her, a desperate longing for the familiar dampness, the faint scent of moss, the quiet presence of the silent wolf. She was truly alone here. The sound of footsteps outside her door jolted her, making her heart leap against her ribs. The heavy door swung inward, revealing Lord Kalen. He entered with the quiet authority she had come to expect, his gray eyes sweeping over her, assessing. A faint aroma of leather and something vaguely metallic, like freshly drawn steel, accompanied him. He did not smile. He rarely did. "Allura," he stated, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to fill the room. He took a few steps closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "You find yourself in new surroundings." She turned from the window, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I find myself a prisoner, Lord Kalen." Her voice was barely a whisper, yet it carried the sting of her pain. He regarded her for a long moment. "A harsh word, Allura. You are a guest, a most important one. You are under my personal protection." His tone was even, betraying no emotion, yet she could feel the steel beneath his words. "The forces you stirred in the temple are powerful, unpredictable. They demand supervision." Allura lifted her gaze, meeting his, a flicker of defiance entering her eyes. "I stirred nothing. The statue chose to act. It chose me to act." Kalen's expression remained impassive. "Indeed, and that choice makes you unique. It makes you a key, Allura, a key to power beyond imagining, or to destruction beyond reckoning." He paused, his gaze piercing. Such a key cannot be left lying in the dust of a forgotten temple. He began to pace slowly, his heavy boots making soft thuds on the stone floor. For 1,000 years, the silent wolf stood as a symbol, a legend. Now it moves, it speaks in its own law, and it bows to you. That is not merely curiosity, Allura. That is destiny. And destiny, if left untended, can be a dangerous thing. A cold dread began to coil in Alara's stomach. She sensed his true intentions, hidden beneath his talk of protection and destiny. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Kalen stopped his pacing, turning back to face her fully. His eyes in the low light seemed to glint with an unsettling intelligence. "I want understanding. I want control. The heart of Lycanthus, the sealed secret beneath the statue, is a force that could reshape our world. It could bring untold prosperity, or it could tear apart the very fabric of our domain." He gestured vaguely towards the window, as if encompassing the entire kingdom. "My duty is to ensure the former and prevent the latter." He took another step, closing the distance between them slightly. "You are the one who woke the statue. You are the one it knelt before. You are the one who felt the pull of the vortex. You are the living conduit to that power, Alara. My intention is to study that connection, to understand how it works, how it can be guided, how it can be mastered." Alara felt a sudden chill, a sense of being stripped bare, her innermost being laid out for inspection. "You mean you intend to use me?" she whispered, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. Kalen raised an eyebrow, a flicker of something like amusement in his eyes, quickly suppressed. "I intend to harness a force for the good of all, Alara, and you, it seems, are an integral part of that force. Think of it as a collaboration. We will work together. You possess the unique ability to interact with this ancient power. I possess the resources, the knowledge, the strategic mind to apply it." He moved closer still, his imposing presence filling her vision. His voice dropped slightly, becoming more intense. "The legends speak of the heart of Lycanthos, not just awakening, but being controlled, being directed. They say it can be a shield or a sword, and you, Alara, are the only one who might wield it, not merely to awaken it, but to truly command its purpose." Her heart throbbed with a mixture of fear and a strange, unwelcome surge of recognition. There was an undeniable truth in his words, a cold logic that resonated with the profound energy she had felt. She was a key, but now she understood Kalen sought not just to unlock the door, but to seize the entire treasure. "What if I refuse?" she asked, her voice gaining a surprising strength. The words felt like a defiance, a small act of rebellion in this gilded cage. Kalen's lips thinned. "Refusal is not an option, Alara. Not for the sake of this domain. Not for your own safety." His eyes held hers, unwavering. "There are many who would seek such power, many who would not be as gentle in their methods as I. Here, you are safe. Here, you will be guided." The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air, chilling her to the bone. He would protect her, yes, but only as a valuable tool, a possession. Her freedom, her destiny, her very self felt suspended in a delicate balance, precariously held in his powerful hands. "Your comfort will be attended to," he continued, his tone returning to its formal cadence. "You will want for nothing, save for your unsupervised wanderings. Guards will be posted. Their presence is for your security, not your imprisonment." The lie was so thinly veiled it was almost insulting. He turned to leave, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the room. He paused at the door, his hand on the latch. "Consider your position, Alara. Consider the potential. We stand at the precipice of a new era. You, whether you wish it or not, are at its very heart." With that, he exited, the heavy door thudding shut behind him, the sound echoing through the room, then fading into the keep's oppressive silence. The clink of armor, the murmur of voices told her the guards were already in place. She was alone again, but not truly. She was watched, contained, a new kind of temple, one built for control rather than reverence. A profound loneliness washed over her, a wave of despair so strong it brought hot tears to her eyes. She covered her face with her hands, letting the silent sobs rack her slender frame. The dream of freedom, of understanding her connection to the statue on her own terms, seemed to dissipate like mist in the strong winds of Kalen's ambition. She pictured Elder Lyra, her worried face, her ancient wisdom. What would she say? What guidance could she offer now? As the initial wave of grief subsided Ilara slowly lowered her hands. Her fingers brushed against something cool and smooth in the pocket of her temple robe. It was a small, perfectly round stone, dark and slightly damp, that she had instinctively picked up from the temple floor just before the guards had led her away. It smelled faintly of moss and ancient earth, a tiny piece of her old world, her true world, smuggled into this fortress of iron and stone. She clutched it tightly, feeling its smooth surface against her palm. A spark ignited within her, small but steady, burning away the despair. This was not the end. It was merely a different path, a forced detour. Lord Kalen saw her as a key, a conduit, a means to an end. He saw the power she might wield, but he did not see her. He did not see the quiet strength, the fierce determination that had allowed her to survive a lifetime of solitude. He did not see the deep, intuitive connection that went beyond mere mechanics. He had taken her body, but her spirit, her mind, remained her own. She looked out the window again, at the vast, dark landscape, stretching beneath the moon. The keep might be formidable, Kalen might be cunning, but the silent wolf had bowed to her. It had chosen her, and she would not simply be a tool in another person's hand. Clenching the small, smooth stone tightly in her fist, Alara made a silent promise to herself. She would uncover the truth of her connection, she would unravel the secrets of the heart of Lacanthos, and she would reclaim her own destiny, no matter the cost, no matter how long it took. What would you have done? One line in the comments. Let's argue it out together. Where did the story catch you? Which scene made you stop and think? A small like is a small move, but it's a big support for this channel. See you in the next story. Subscribe so you don't miss it.